Well, welcome and good evening, and welcome to another presentation of Sefer Academy. Tonight's presentation is going to be on the seasons, a study on the appointed times. I'm so glad you could join me tonight. I'm Stephen Pigeon, and it's just good to see everybody. I see everybody gathering in the chat. And, as explosive as this topic is, let's try to keep reasonable minds, because as you know, reasonable minds can disagree, except for that one fella. Who's been all disagreeable his whole life, but that goes without saying, right? All right. So as we get going here tonight, we're going to start tonight, first of all, with a little bit different presentation tonight, rather than discussing, current events or some of the other things. We're going to start out with, I want to introduce to you Shel Wagner. And Shel Wagner is going to be joining us on Sefer Academy. She's going to be joining us on Sefer Academy as a teacher. Now, let's see if I can find her. Where'd you go, Shel? Where
I think I'm right here. Can you see me?
Okay, hold on. I'm just about to see you. There you go. All right, there you are. All right, there's Shel. There's Shel Wagner with us. Yeah, Shel. So Sefer Academy is just crazy. You're part of the Hebrew alphabet class, right? Aleph Bet class.
Right.
And you have to admit that class got wild last Wednesday, didn't it?
Well, with revelation, things that we hadn't, considered before. And now, what's funny, ever since we started talking about, should something, is it really a prefix? I'm looking at every word a little differently. I was looking at Migdal today and going, wait a minute, the one for tower, do we get a different picture if I separate that off?
Yeah, we do, because look, when you look at Migdal, right? If the mem means from, the prefix, then what do you have? You have Gimel Dalet Lamed, which means Gadul, right?
Right.
So, which means strength or big, right?
Right.
From that which is large, right? Which is now construed as tower.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? It's so, and with the Hebrew, it just keeps revealing. And yes, it may not be a prefix. Maybe that's just the name, right? But when we look to the prefixes and the suffixes, all of a sudden the words are like boom, and this revelation that came in at the end of the discussion on the Dalet, here we are just discussing the fourth letter of the Aleph Bet, and the Dalet turns out to be explosive, absolutely explosive. And one thing we didn't share on that, that we were talking about in that was the word for blood, right? Which is this word dam, Dalet, mem, Sophie, or the final mem, right? And as we were talking about that, I was talking with my wife about it. And she said, oh, yeah, well, let's look at that. What does that mean? And I said, well, Dalet is really not the door, even though Delet is door in Hebrew. But Dalet is more like an entrance or a gateway. It's when you go from being outside to being inside, or when you go from being inside to being outside, right? So it's really more of a portal.
Yeah.
Than it is a wooden door. So when you have Mashiach saying, I am the door, right? I am the door. Does that mean he's a 6-paneled wood door?
Absolutely not.
No,
the entryway, right? The way in.
Yeah, the way in. I'm the way in, right? I'm the portal in, right? But so when you look at the Mem Sophit, now this is kind of a representation. Yeah, it means water, right? Mime being water. And mem being kind of an extrapolation of that. But when you look at the mem representing the womb, right? The womb, what do we see? We see the statement in Dam, and I was asking, actually my wife asked me, she said, well, where do you think blood comes from? Because we talk about life. All life on earth, is described as the life of the flesh is in the blood. This is Leviticus 17:11, right? Mm-hmm. So the life of the flesh is in the blood. Okay, fantastic. All right, so where'd the blood come from? We know where the breath came from, because Yah breathed his name into the nostrils of the dust, and the dust became a living soul. Adam, right? Adam, right? The ultimate authority and blood. Dam, right? So so when we look at this now, so where's this blood come from? Well, the blood begins to self-populate. The blood cells begin to self-populate at the moment of conception. So you have this spark inside the ovum at the moment of conception. There's a spark, a visible spark. And with this spark, blood begins to self-replicate, right?
Right.
So the blood is birthed in the womb. So what do we see? The portal is the womb. This is what dam means, right? The blood, the portal is the womb, right? Exciting, huh?
It really is. And I mean, gosh, when we just look to what do the scriptures say, it answers the biggest questions that are in our society today. When does life begin? Well, we can see it in the Hebrew and we can see it scientifically, right? It begins at conception.
Yeah, and the Hebrew is just giving it to us. It just shows it to us, right?
There.
Yeah. And so, of course, when you see about the discussion about the blood, just remember that when Yah looks at life on the earth, it's in the blood, right? The life of the flesh is in the blood. That's Leviticus 17:11, Vayikra 17:11. And so anyway, but these are the kinds of things. And, the beauty of it is, as we discuss just the Aleph Beit, we're not talking about, let's do some exegesis on the deep end of Proverbs. We're talking about discussing the Aleph Beit and the implications of what we're seeing in the letters with some examples. And so what we see is people are beginning to think with the Hebraic mindset. Wait a minute. What if that's a prefix, right?
Yeah. I was sharing something when earlier today, and it was a statement. You had made a statement in our Hebrew class, and I was writing it down as fast as I could because I thought, that's it. And the statement was, as we study the Hebrew language, we take on Hebrew thought. The language itself is prophetic.
It is. Yeah. The language itself is prophetic. And we see this even in the Yod He Vav He, right? In the Yod He Vav He, you see this Yod He Vav He. Now, we haven't studied any of these letters, but we're about to cross the threshold into He. And when we cross the threshold into He, we're going to be seeing something about the He that is quite remarkable because it's the representative, right? It's the representative of the exhalation of breath. And we know that the Ruach, that's with a at the end, not a, but
I know I'm working on those gutturals.
Yeah. Ruach. But anyway, but you see that breath, right? So what does Mashiach say? It says, what would Jesus have done with the COVID pandemic? Well, he breathed on them and said, receive ye the Ruach HaKodesh, right? And we also see that creation itself had to do with the breath of Yah hovering over that which was void and without form, right? In Genesis 1:2, this was the breath, the Ruach, the breath. And then we see another example of this when Mashiach says what? As you cannot tell from where the wind comes or to where the wind goes, so goes the Ruach HaKodesh. Because in Hebrew, but you can't tell from where the Ruach, the wind comes, and from where the Ruach goes, so goes the Ruach HaKodesh. Oh, okay. All right. So we begin to see this, really kind of a phenomenal idea about the breath, Well, this breath is represented with this Hey. Now, sometimes ha, sometimes ah. So Torah, right? So you have this idea of the Tav Resh Vav He. So you don't say, or Tav Vav Resh He. You don't say Torah. You say Torah. Right? Or how about Serah? Do you say Serah or Serah? No, you say Serah because the He at the end just merely ah. Okay.
Well, and you know what I love about that? If we've already looked at the Creator's name, well, he's put his name in his people. So we know we know the because it's given. There's Yah, there's Yahuah. It's
there. It is.
Right
there's
there.
The ah. Yeah.
Yeah. From Abram to Avraham, from Sarah to Sarah, the ah is there.
There it is. But what does it mark? What does it mark here, Shelley? It marks the presence of the Ruach. The presence of the breath of Yah is now in this person, the presence, right? And so now when you see this as the breath, so when you look at the Yod He Vav He, you see Yod, the hand of the Creator, He, his breath. Then you see the Vav, the nail that is going to signify Mashiach. And you see what? His breath. Yeah. See? So this is prophetic. All of a sudden, the language itself is prophetic. All right. Well, Shelley, so I understand you're going to be doing teaching with us. It's going to be so good to have you teaching. You know, we were talking about this earlier today, and you were talking about this business of kind of teaching from the middle out. Now, can you explain that just a little bit, what you got in mind there?
You know, I just don't like to do things the normal way, right?
Abby something.
So this really, you know, the reason sometimes I do things this way, I love chiastic patterns. Anytime I see something that I can begin to see it lining up, when I see, you know, equal on each side and what it's pointing to, you know, the heart of the matter, you know, I think that we can learn more from that sometimes. The other reason is, you know, I raised a daughter that had dyslexia. And so when I began to homeschool her, you know, we were already in 7th grade and she couldn't read, and I needed tools. And so, you know, the faithfulness of our Father led me to exactly the tool I needed, which was I went to a conference, and there was a homeschool dad who happened to be a scientist whose specialty was dealing with dyslexia. Just so happened the first year I need the answer's there, right? So I bought his book. I brought it home, I studied it, and what he was explaining, that dyslexia, you know, we had fought in the school system for years, the public school system, and then the private Christian school system. And everybody wanted to put a label on my daughter that said, this is going to be a lifelong problem. She'll never be able to learn like everybody else. I mean, it was curse after curse after curse. And I said, I don't believe that, you know, I just don't believe that. And I'm not going to buy that answer. So through prayer and belief and faith, the Father in his faithfulness gives me an answer. So basically the premise that this particular homeschool dad scientist taught was the brain needs to be challenged. You know, it needs to be challenged. So do things like this. Put her on a balance beam, have her touch her nose, arm to arm, and recite the ABCs, right? And so we did those things, and we did it consistently day after day as we read fabulous books and I would just read it with her, you know, kind of pointing out. And as we exercised the brain in that way, challenging it to have to reach for different answers, the brain strengthened and dyslexia was no longer a problem. At the end of 2 years, she was reading at a college level and went to work for a journalist in her high school career.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What a testimony. I mean, that's a great testimony. Okay. So when you talk about this, idea of coming in out of the middle, right? Like, for instance, we know that, like with the menorah, you know, technically the lighting schedule is the middle lamp, then right, then left, then right, then left, then outer, right? So boom, 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 right? Mm-hmm. And so this is kind of the concept of sevening, if you will, the menorah. And so we have this same kind of formula, and we often see this in scripture. You know, Revelation is a very typical example. You have chapters 1 through 9, which is one prophecy. Then you get chapter 10, and it says, you know, take this book and eat it, right? I used to have teachers when I was in high school tell me that, you know. It was something to the effect. Was that
when they were writing talks too much? No.
You know, yeah, that's exactly right. You know, if you're not going to read it, I'm going to make you eat it. How's that sound? Right? It was something like that, you know. Yeah, but but the beauty of it is that you know, here the angel is talking to John, Yochanan, and he says, you know, take this book and eat it, and it's going to be sweet, but then it's going to bounce in your belly, right? It's kind of like a bad meal.
Yeah.
And then prophesy anew, right? Prophesy anew. And so you have this very formula you're talking about, that if you were to examine that, and if you examine Revelation closely, you'll see that there are 3 menorahs coming up to chapter 10 and 3 menorahs descending from it. And that chapter 10, right, the 7 thunders, we're not going to tell you what those are, right? That's the shamash, that's the center servant lamp from which everything else lights, right? So I think that teaching method is going to be very exciting. And I think you're going to have a lot of good things to say. and a great approach. So I want to encourage people that your teaching program is going to be on Mondays,
right,
at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So that's noon Central Time, 11 Mountain Time, 10 Pacific Time, and 3 o'clock in the morning Alaskan time.
exactly.
Depending on how far out in the bush you are, right?
That's right.
Depending on how far out you are. Yeah. But that's going to be great. Okay. And that's on Monday.
Right.
And the class is going to be, you're going to be discussing the paleo and the pictograph, and you're going to be taking it from some of these formulas and exploring a whole different area of exploration than what I'm doing and teaching the Aleph Beit. Is that correct?
That's correct. Because it is a different modality, and we get different things. Like today, when I was just kind of explaining a little bit about the class, what grabbed me, I like to compare everything to scripture, because like here's an example. You read one person's book and they say, well, if you're taking it to the paleo, this is, when we look at Padres, right? When we look at the Pashat and we look at the the
Ramesh and the Darash,
and the Sod, yeah. So I mean, some people feel like, oh, well, it's definitely just the most simplistic, view. And I understand their point, but yet I'm looking at it and going, I see a whole lot of Sod there. I just, this whole prophecy out of Zephaniah 3, 8, and 9, 3, 8, everything, actually, the entire books of Zephaniah 1, 2, and 3, up to and through verse 8 is really talking about what I believe is this time period that we're living in now, where things are coming to a close, right?
Yep.
And then the promises, and in the midst of all that, he's going to restore unto us a pure language. And so, boy, I started looking at that and thinking about it because I've been doing a lot of study out of Jasher. And what was Moshe's contention is, I'm not qualified for this because I have uncircumcised lips. And I started thinking about that, right? And so what was he really saying? I took that,
and while you're looking for that, Shelley, you got to keep in mind, what did Isaiah say when he was translated up into heaven, which is what his own testimony is? I didn't say it. Isaiah said it. He's translated up to heaven and he sees, Yah sitting on the throne. And he says, woe is me, for I have unclean lips.
Yeah. And so I started thinking about that. And so what do we know, like from the book of Jasher, what was Moshe's story? He was raised as royalty in the house of Egypt, in the house of Pharaoh. So his thinking pattern had to do with the way that Egypt thinks, right? And so when you look at this with language, and we're looking at these unclean lips, the word is arel, this uncircumcised, right? So you've got the ayin, the all-seeing eye. You've got the resh, with the way man thinks. That's always how I think of that one, is, the thoughts of man. And then you've got the staff of authority. So if he's saying, my lips are arel, he's saying, yeah, I've come to the point to where I understand that my thinking, because what comes out of our mouth? What makes a man unclean?
Boom.
Right?
Yeah.
So there it is. That if our thinking is of the way of Egypt, because that's how we've been raised, this was the fear that was coming upon him because he had been humbled, and
to recognize that what's coming out of his mind is strictly the training of the all-seeing eye.
Yes.
I only know Egypt, right?
Yes.
And so when you think about that, you think about Moshe going into the desert and saying, I've got to get the Egypt out of these people. But the Egypt had to come out of him too.
First.
Yeah.
And so that fear and trembling of saying, I don't know that I'm qualified to do this because I have the mind of Egypt.
But when we read the ancient texts, we find some very interesting things. Like, for instance, in Jasher, we find that the Hebrew language had disappeared at the time of Abraham. It was gone. But then, and Abraham's like, well, what? And when you think about it, when the language disappeared, everybody became illiterate again. And there's many times in human history where everybody around you can't read or write.
Yeah.
And this was this occasion with Abraham, who overnight is given the Hebrew language. He's given the Ivrit, where he can speak it, he can read it, and he can write it overnight.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so
Amazing.
this, it becomes really kind of a huge tale. The same thing happens with Joseph when he's in front of Pharaoh. And Jasher describes him being downloaded the 72 languages of the world overnight. And this is reiterated in Psalm 81:4, right? When he was called Yahusha.
Right. Amazing. So I was looking at one more thing today out of Genesis 11, when, they all have one language and Yah's got to do something about it, right? Because they're building the tower, right? So I'm looking at that. And so in Genesis 11:7, it says, Go to let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So I'm looking at this word confound, and it's a bet lamed lamed, Babel, right? And so, but I was looking at that and I thought, okay, let me take that as a prefix almost, or, what have we got? We've got the house of la 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 la.
Oh yeah. So it is, right? And it's like when we were teaching on yada, yada is to know, right? And so when people say yada yada yada, right? Yada yada yada, right? Right. Right. Yeah. Well, Shelley, I'll tell you, it's exciting. I know your class is starting on March 14th.
Yeah.
Monday, March 14th at 1 p.m. Eastern time.
Yes.
Which, as you know, is 3 o'clock in the morning in Alaska time, but only midnight in the UK. I mean, maybe that's in Finland. We have people from all over the world participating now. So the timeline is very, it's hard to get fit everybody in a schedule. But I really do appreciate everybody from other parts of the world joining us when it's late in their time, late in their schedule. And so with that, Shelley, thank you for coming on board.
Thank you.
And so I'm gonna minimize our faces so nobody can read our lips. Sorry about this, Jessica, but I couldn't figure out how to get us at a better screen size, and we exhausted all the resources we had. But I'm going to go ahead and share our screen now, and let's get our presentation going with the seasons. Now, again, I mean, I have to tell you, exciting. This study on the seasons, we've been going through the calendar. We spent a little bit of time on the rhythm of life, talking about Shabbat, talking about the days, talking about the years, talking about all these kinds of things. Now we're going to deal with the seasons, okay? Because when we deal with how are we going to find the month? Hey, look, we think we can find the first day of the month, predicated on the dark moon, the covered moon, the keseh or kasa, that indicates covering. Okay, so maybe that tells us the new moon, the chodesh, that would give us this dark moon, give us the first day of the month. Okay, but what's the first month of the year? How are we supposed to know this? Well, let's take a look. Okay, so here we are, the seasons. A study on the appointed times of Yahuah. And so we have a little graphic here. Spring, summer, fall, winter, right? And I started it in the spring because that's when the biblical calendar starts, in the spring. A study on the appointed times of Yahuah, the seasons. Okay. All right, now let's take a look. So we're going to start here with this passage in Breshith, Genesis 1:14 through 19. And Elohim said, this is the passage that all the biblical scholars use for determining, okay, what's going on with the calendar. This is it. And Elohim said that let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for appointed feasts, and for days and for years. Now, we dealt with this the last couple of times pretty exhaustively. And let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth, and it was so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, Now, wait a minute. Just let me get out I got to annotate here. If I'm not annotating, I start to go into my obsessive disorder. It's like, Shelley, I had to drop out of, Overeaters Anonymous. They had a 2 cheesecake minimum. It was bad. Anyway, so here's what we have. We have the greater light. Okay, the greater light to rule the day. Boom. Okay. And then we have the lesser light to rule the night. And what else? Oh, he made the stars also. And Elohim set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth and to rule over the day, which is Yom, and over the night, which is Lila. Now, this is kind of important, right? To rule over the day, Yom, and over the night, Lila. So we see that there is a distinction between Yom and Lila. And to divide the light, or from the darkness, Choshech. And Elohim saw that it was good, and in the evening, Erev, and the morning, Boker, were the 4th day, or Yom. Okay. All right, good. So, so far, we're off to a good start. Why? Because I haven't said anything yet. That's why it's still a good start. All right. So on the 4th day, he created the sun and the moon and the stars. Now this, we're going to talk about Bereshith again, chapter 2, 9 through 10. On the 4th day, he created the sun and the moon and the stars. See, wait, here it is again. He created the sun and the moon and the stars, and set them in the expanse of heaven to give light upon the earth and rule over the day and the night, divide the light from the darkness. And Elohim appointed the sun to be the great sign. So we know what the greater light is, right? The sun. On the earth for days, for Shabbats, for months, for feasts, for years, for Shabbats of years, and for jubilees, and for all seasons of the years. All seasons of the years. And it divides the light from darkness and prosperity, that all things may prosper which shoot and grow on the earth. In other words, agricultural calendar. These 3 kinds. What? Yeah, 3 kinds, not 2 kinds, 3 kinds. The sun, the moon, and the stars. Those 3 kinds he made on the 4th day, according to Jubilees. All right. So when we take a look at this idea, so people say, well, look, this is a pretty easy formula. That day begins at sundown because it says the evening and the morning were the 1st day. All right. Now, when we look at this, here was some of the magic words, if you will, in that passage in Genesis. Day, which is Yom, night, which is Lila. Now, why didn't he say the Yom and the Lila were the 1st day? He didn't say that. He instead said the Erev and the Boker are the 1st day, right? And so we see light as Or, darkness as Choshech, evening Erev, morning Boker, and the day Yom. So we might better understand the Erev as going from the zenith at noon to darkness. That is to say, the waning of sunlight. So we could kind of look at it kind of like this, if you will, the waning of sunlight, right? The day crescendo, as we say in music. But the morning, the Boker, well, this may be better stated as from the daylight to the zenith, or the waxing of sunlight at noon. Now, there was a good discussion on the Rhythm of Life Part 2 in the chats. There were a number of people who made a point and said, well, look, it's not sunrise, Dr. P. It is daylight, which is different. Now, I can tell you where I live, we live in the mountains, right? So we have these magnificent peaks around here that are huge and beautiful. But guess what? They block the sun out. So in the winter, we get sometimes hours of daylight before the sun cracks up over the top of the mountains, right? And so, so it's daylight, not sunrise. And so this you might see as personified as a crescendo, crescendo waxing into noon, decrescendo waning from noon. So what do you see? Like in the Spanish language, right? They have this greeting, buenas tardes, right? So buenos dias. And then when you get in kind of the afternoon, hey, things are kind of waning here, buenas tardes, right? It's not just Dobry вечер like you have in Russian, Dobry вечер, good evening, but rather it's more of a good afternoon kind of thing, right? And so you see, there's a little bit of a distinction. We can see some of this connotation, but both of these, the waning and the waxing, these constitute the day, right? Okay, let's see, let's continue. So what do we see in Breshith 1:14 through 19? We find lights in the expanse of the heavens, the greater light, i.e. the sun, the lesser light, i.e. the moon, and the stars also. Okay, that's good. What don't we see? What don't we see? Well, we don't find a rabbi anywhere in there. Where's the rabbi? I don't know. He didn't make it into that list. You don't have a sun until the rabbi sees it. And you don't have a moon until the rabbi sees it. Right? So there's no rabbi mentioned in Genesis at all. And then you have the barley. No, we don't have the barley there. And we don't have flax. And we don't have Jerusalem. None of these things appear in this passage. So unless there's a Jerusalem, there was no possibility of knowing the first day of the month. Right? Is that right? No way that Adam could have known the first day of the month, or Noah, even though he was counting, the 17th day of the second month is when the flood began. Well, was he counting that? Well, he had to count it because it's in the script. Moses was counting it. That was well before Jerusalem. Well, okay. So I guess a rabbi seeing the moon over Jerusalem is not included here at all. All right. You know what I'm talking about, Shelley. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. So let's continue on to Breshith in Genesis. Now Yahweh had said unto Abram, get you out of your country and from your kindred and from your father's house unto a land that I will show you. And I will make of you a great nation, and I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless you and curse him that curses you. And in you shall all families of the earth be blessed. Now, was Abraham Jewish? No, he was not Jewish, because there was nobody that was Jewish on earth until you get from Abraham to Yitzchak, from Yitzchak to Yaakov, from Yaakov to his son Judah. Here's the first time you get anybody Jewish is when you get to Judah, the son of Yaakov, 4 generations later. So Abraham was not Jewish, and he was not Israeli either. He was Hebrew. But it says right here, I will bless them that bless you and curse him that curses you. Well, all right, well, let's talk about that, since everybody likes to break that passage out. The scriptures say he's going to bless them and he's going to curse them that curse it. Well, just hold up here, because Abraham was told what? You're going to be a father of many nations. How's that expressed in the Hebrew? Melo goyim. Melo goyim. So melo goyim means what? Goyim, not Israeli, not Yasharel, right? But many nations. And what? I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless you, you father of many nations. And I'm going to curse him that curses you, you father of many nations. So what does this mean? The many nations are equally blessed. Those who bless them will be blessed. Those who curse them will be cursed. Okay, so Avram departed as Yahweh had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Avram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. Now, this point right here, okay, this point right here, boom. This begins the marker that is going to be referenced by Moshe later. This begins the count. And Avram was 75 years old when he departed out of Haran. And Avram took Sarai, his woman, Lot, his brother's son, and all their substance that they had gathered, and all the souls that had gotten in Haran, all the souls they had gotten in Haran. What? Are you trying to tell me that Abraham was a slave owner? Looks like it. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. Okay, that's Bereshit 12, 1 through 5. And in the 6th week, in the 5th year thereof, Abraham sat up throughout the night on the new moon of the 7th month. The new moon of the 7th month, that would be Tishri in the modern calendar, to observe the stars from the evening to the morning, in order to see what would be the character of the year. Wait, just hold up here. Abraham would do what? Observe the stars from the evening to the morning. Now, when you observe the stars from the evening to the morning, what do you see? Motion. So for instance, I was at my son-in-law's house last night and we were looking, he had this app, and I've got the app now too on my phone. And the app is really cool. And the app is called Skyview. And so with Skyview, you click on the app and then you can just point your phone up and it shows you exactly where the constellations are. And it gives you the constellations so you can see them. And the stars, and it names a bunch of other stuff, which is pretty cool. So I was looking, of course, for Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, we call it up here, which means the big bear, right? And here we're looking, we're finding, it's straight up over our head last night at 11 o'clock, right? The Big Dipper was straight up over our head. But just before the show, I checked on the Big Dipper, and the Big Dipper was over here, right? And it was in a completely different configuration. It had moved. It was not in the same position that it moved. And you see that if you're observing the stars from evening to morning, you're going to see motion, and it's equally true depending on where you are on the earth. Like where we are up here, we see the same stars all the time, and they never disappear. They never disappear. And the reason they don't disappear is because we're too far north, right? We're way up here. We're way up at the top of the world. We're seeing all this stuff. But when you start getting south down into the Tropic of Cancer, and between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, which kind of, let's call it the mid-belt, you get a different set of stars, a different set of constellations, and you get the appearance of a constellation and the disappearance of a constellation. Okay? It comes and it goes. Now, here's what we see. So last night we're looking at Virgo. And Virgo has this star called Spica. We're going to get to Spica when we get later on to this. But you could also see the event horizon. So there's a line drawing what's visible and what isn't visible, right? And so part of Virgo was visible, but Spica was not. Then this morning when I was looking at the Big Dipper, guess what? Virgo was completely under the line. The whole of the constellation was under the line. Okay, so here you have Abraham observing the stars from evening and to the morning to see what would be the character of the year. What would be the character of the year? We can look at the stars and see what would be the character of the year. This is what this is teaching it. And he was alone and he sat and observed. And a word came into his heart and he said, all the signs of the stars, right? And remember, what was said in Genesis 1:14? That the sun and the moon and also the stars were given for signs and appointed feasts and days and years. Well, all the signs of the stars and the signs of the moon and the signs of the sun, well, they're all in the hand of Yahuah, right? Why do I search them out? How do I know? I mean, I'm looking out here, I can't figure anything out. If he desires it, he causes it to rain morning and evening. And if he desires, he withholds it. And that's that. Stop looking at the stars trying to figure out if it's going to rain or not. But are there other things that we can see in those stars? Well, I think there are. Okay. And he prayed that night and he said, now listen, look at this prayer. I found this prayer absolutely remarkable. My Elohim El Elyon, okay, which would be, in English, God Almighty, but El Elyon, my Elohim El Elyon, you alone are my Elohim, and you and your dominion have I chosen. Not some wacky Egyptian animal god or a bunch of gods over there out of India. And you have created all things and all things that are the work of your hands. Now, what does he say? Deliver me from the hands of evil Ruachot. Right? What do we see in the Our Father prayer? Deliver us from evil, right? But here, and you can't find that anywhere in Dave. You can't find that. Why is Mashiach quoting that phrase? It doesn't appear anywhere in 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel's, 1st and 2nd, 1st and 2nd, whatever. It doesn't appear any of it, right? It appears here. Deliver me from the hands of evil Ruachot, evil spirits, who have dominion over the thoughts of men's hearts, and let them not lead me astray. Right? So what do we see in the prayer? Lead us not into temptation, right? like Yah is going to lead people into temptation. You see, this paraphrase that we get in the Greek downstream from what was being discussed, you forget about the fact that he's saying, deliver me from the hands of evil ruachot. Deliver us from evil. Well, deliver us from the evil inclination. Deliver us from evil spirits. Deliver us from these demons, right? And don't let them lead us astray. Not you. Don't let them lead me astray from you, my Elohim, and establish me and my seed forever, that we may not go astray from henceforth and forevermore. Okay, I found that prayer pretty kind of interesting when I was looking at it. Okay, now we're going to see here, and Avram journeyed from Haran, and he took Sarai, his woman, and Lot, his brother, and Haran's son, to the land of Canaan, and he came into Ashur and proceeded to Shechem and dwelt near a lofty oak, and he saw, and behold, the land was very pleasant from the entering of Hamat to the lofty oak. And Yahweh said unto him, to you and your seed will I give this land. Jubilees 13, 1-3. And it came to pass in the first year, in the 7th week of years, on the new moon of the first month, that he built an altar on this mountain and called on the name of Yahuah. So that would be, guess what? Shechem. That would be right where Gideon's tomb is right now, overlooking the city of Nablus, where Joseph's tomb is, Shechem, right? Abraham entered the Holy Land, the same place Joshua did, the same place Yitzhak did, where the same place Yaakov did, where Yaakov's well is, right? Shechem. Okay, and he removed from thence and went towards the Negev, and he came to Chevron. Hey, he came to Chevron. Well, I didn't know they had a gas station. There was a gas station in Israel. Well, no wonder he was able to travel so freely, because he came right to the Chevron station, filled up the car, and then everything was good, right? And the Chevron station was built at that time, and they had two guys that would not only fill your car, but they would check your oil and do your windshield. No, right? This spelling here, Chevron, is actually Hebron. Oh, what they say in modern English, Hebron, right? Hebron. And this is pronounced Hebron, right? Okay. So I thought you'd appreciate that. Anyway, it was built, the city, Hebron, was built at that time, and he dwelt there 2 years. And he went thence into the land of Negev to Baalot. That would be the place of Baalis, right? And in this case, feminine plural, which means they were female idols, right? Baalot. And there was a famine in the land. Well, no wonder there was a famine in the land, because you guys were over here worshiping these idols. And Avram went into Mitzrayim in the 3rd year of the week, and he dwelt in Mitzrayim for 5 years. Oh, okay. So it looks like he was in year 1 of this, then 2 years here, then 3 years there, then 5 years here. When you put all that together, you end up at the end of the Jubilee, before his woman was torn away from him. Okay, so Hebron is the destination point for Abraham and his arrival in the land of Canaan, where he arrived some days later from Shechem. If it took him 14 days to get from Shechem to Hebron, then he would have arrived at Hebron on the 14th day of the first month. So this would begin the 430-year count. Why is that important? Well, so here's what it says in Shemot, Exodus. Now the sojourning of the children of Yasharel, who dwelt in the land of Mitzrayim, in the land of Canaan, the children of Yasharel, they and who? And their fathers. So does this just mean the tribal fathers? No, it means Yaakov, Yitzhak, Abraham. So when you're calculating the 430 years, you calculate the sojourning of the children of Yasharel and their fathers. And it was 430 years, and it came to pass at the end of 430 years, even the very self-same day it came to pass, that all the hosts of Yahuah went out from the land of Mitzrayim. So the father of the children of Yasharel were, of course, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. All right. Well, this is interesting, because now you're saying they came out on the 14th day. So they came out on the Passover. It came out on Matzah, actually. The 15th day is when they came out, the 15th day. They came out on the 15th day, and they did it back then too. So Abraham began his sojourning, and then 430 years later, boom, it's realized again. So Yahweh spoke unto El Moshe and El Aharon in the land of Mitzrayim, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Now, how the seventh month became the first month of the year is probably the same way that the Gregorian 11th month became the first month of the year in the Gregorian calendar, right? Somebody moved it. What do you think about that? Oh, I'm not going to keep it there. Let's move it over here. And why would you move it to the seventh month? Because that is the mid-waning, right? That would be when the sun goes down in the day. Therefore, that, and if you're going to keep the day by saying that's when the sun goes down, then you would keep the new year when the sun goes down, when the waning is over and you head into winter, right? But we're seeing here that Yah didn't say that at all. He said the beginning of months, this one, this is the first month of the year to you. Guard the month of Aviv, and keep the Pesach unto Yahweh Eloheka. For in the month of Aviv, Yahweh brought you forth out of the Mitzrayim by night. Okay, so what? The month that Yahweh brought you out of Mitzrayim by night, that's the month, Aviv, and that month is the first month of the year. I didn't say it. It's written right there. Okay. These are the feast of Yahuah, even the holy assemblies, which ye shall proclaim in their appointed times. And the 14th day of the first month at even is Yahweh's Pesach. Now, okay, so this, I used to think, okay, well, that means at even, that's when the 14th day begins, right? But that's not what it says here. That isn't what it says. It says on the 14th day at even. So the even of the 14th day, that means the day is already underway, and then we get to its even that night. Well, that's Yahweh's Pesach. Why? Because you're going to eat at night, and then you're going to stay there all dressed up, ready to go, raring to go. You don't get a chance to let your bread leaven. This is it. Stay dressed, eat the lamb, and then hit the road, right? On the 15th day, that would be after the dawning of the following morning of the same month, is the Feast of Matzah. 7 days you must eat matzah. In the first day you shall have a holy assembly. Okay, first day, holy assembly. And ye shall do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh for 7 days. And the seventh day is also a holy assembly. 1 and 7, holy. And you shall do no servile work therein. Now, of course, if you look at that no servile work, we know, Shelley, that when you're talking about doing no servile work, that means, you get 6 rabbis in the corner and you start talking about, well, what's servile work? Well, I think that it's probably gathering firewood. Yeah. What about walking? Yeah, that's servile work. Cooking. Yeah, that's servile work. Cleaning, servile work. Doing your job, servile work.
What about spitting in mud and making a paste? Yeah,
spitting in mud, making a paste, servile work, right? Well, what about other stuff? Well, like what? Well, exercising. Can you go to the gym? No, that's servile work. Okay, so can't take the weights up to the attic. That's out, right? No doing the honey-do list. That's servile work, right? And ultimately, you come to the conclusion that inhaling is servile work, right? If you're lifting your hand to put food in your face, that's servile work. Okay, so no servile work. By the time they're done discussing it, put yourself in a coma. That's it. Yeah. There's nothing you're going to do.
It's no longer the blessing that it was intended to be. Now it's turned into a bunch of rules that you better make sure you don't break. Well, what were we taught? Sabbath was given as a gift to man. Does that sound like a gift?
Right. In Jubilees, it says, eat, drink, and bless Yah. It's a simple formula, right? Eat, drink, and bless Yah. Don't eat, drink, and forget about Yah. Eat, drink, and bless Yah, right? Okay, so now we're going to see that as we continue on this, we're going to see that we're going to continue into these feasts, and we're going to begin to talk about the 7 Moedim, the appointed feasts or seasons. So when we look at this Genesis 1:14, we know that we have this signs, which is atot or otot, aleph tav, right? Otot. Then we have appointed times or appointed seasons or appointed feasts. That word there is moedim, from the root moed, and appointed feast, moedim, plural, moedim, appointed feast. Then you have days Yomim, Yom being day, Yomim being plural, and years, Shanaim. Shanaim. So the Shana being a year, Shanaim being years, right? Okay, so let's see if we can get back in here, see what we're doing. I'm not sure where I am. I think I'm nuts. I think I'm going to lose my place, but here, let's find out. Boom. Nope, that isn't it. Hold on. Here it is. Okay. Haha, didn't lose it. Okay. So these are the feasts of Yahuah, even holy assemblies, which ye shall proclaim in their appointed times. In their appointed, right? Here we see it. Here we are right here once again. You're going to see this in their appointed times, Moedim. And the 14th day of the first month at even is the Pesach. On the 15th day of the same month is Matzah. 7 days eat Matzah. First day have a holy assembly. A holy assembly. We're going to talk about that a little bit when we get later on into this discussion. Do no servile work therein, but ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahuah 7 days. And the seventh day is a holy assembly, and ye shall do no servile work. Okay, fantastic. All right. So in 23:10, Vayikra, Leviticus 23, and for those of you guys who are kind of new to the feasts, if you want to get the roster that's really quick shorthand, it's Leviticus 23. Read that, and you'll have a pretty good idea about what's going on, right? Leviticus 23. Speak unto the children of Yasharel and say unto them, when ye are come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then ye shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. Oh, okay. All right. Hold on here just a minute. Hold on here for just 1 second. I got to move this thing over here. Just what am I doing? Come on. Okay, here we go. All right, just a second. I'm becoming a digital expert here. Okay, so here we see this. He says, reap the harvest thereof. Then you shall bring a sheaf. You shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. A sheaf. Okay. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahuah to be accepted for you on the morrow. After the Shabbat, the priest shall wave it. On the morrow after the Shabbat, the priest shall wave it. Okay. Now, even though you have this idea of the first and the seventh day of Matzah being a Shabbat, this Shabbat we're talking about here, we're talking about a Shabbat that is the regular seventh day Shabbat. All right. Now, this is problematic for a lot of people because a lot of people say, well, I don't believe in the regular Shabbat. I believe in the Shabbat on the 8th, 15th, 23rd, and the 30th. And that's that. And then there's a reset every month. Well, I can't find any scriptural support for a reset every month. I can't find that.
It sounds chaotic. Wouldn't that feel, I mean, I just have to think about like, I often hear you say the thing, rhythm of life, that, it sets the rhythm of life. And I think about that, if I had to try to arrange my husband's schedule and go, oh no, well, this time it's going to be Tuesday. Oh, honey, no, next week it's going to be Thursday. Oh, I'm sorry. On the third week of the month, it's going to fall on Saturday, but the fourth week, it's going to fall on Monday. So it sounds chaotic.
Right. And, well, it is. And you have this problem that when you run a monthly schedule, so let's say you have a 28-day month, right, which is very common in the moon calendar. So you have your new moon, which is day one. And then some say, well, you don't count new moon as the Shabbat. It's the very next day, the second, which is Shabbat. But then you wouldn't arrive at the 8th, right? So, okay, so you have, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth. No, you would arrive at the 8th. So new moon, then the very next day is Shabbat. So that's 2 days of Shabbat at the beginning of the month. Then you go to the 8th day. Okay, that's Shabbat. You go to the 15th day. That's Shabbat. You go to the 23rd. That's Shabbat. But wait, this month only has 28 days. Okay, so the 23rd day, Shabbat, now 24th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, only 5 days to the end of the month, and you're at the new moon. And guess what? Then you have then you come into the next Shabbat, right? What happens when you have a 29-day month, which you do have? That, instead of becoming a 7-day gap between Sabbaths, becomes an 8-day gap. And when you have a 31-day or a 30-day month, which you also have, that becomes a 9-day gap. Okay. And so if you're keeping the Sabbath on the 30th day, then you go 23rd, 30, you got a Shabbat. The next day becomes the first of the month, another Shabbat, and then the next day becomes another Shabbat, right? Okay. So, and there's no scriptural support for that concept. There's just none. And then when you look at the idea of the 364-day calendar, you have to have this leap year, this leap day every year, right? Because you got 364 days. Now we have to have the makeup day, the 365th day. And then every fourth year, we're going to have a 366th day, right? In order to make up. And then this is like carefully not disclosed anywhere. And then what's it do to your calendar when you're forcing a 30, 30, and 31 day calendar on that? It gets weird. You're off to the equinoxes, you're off to the solstices, and you're way off on the moon calendar. You're just completely off, right?
Right.
So this is why these things, and then other people say, well, let's do the 360-day calendar, right? Because this is the prophetic calendar given to us in Daniel. Well, right. You have a very similar kind of calendar in Islam, right? Because that is strictly a lunar calendar. It's a 12-month lunar calendar. So come the new moon, that's the month. And when we get down to 12, then we start the next month where it is. We're not going to do any planting by that. That's why Ramadan just keeps moving up in the year. It was in December. Now it's in August. Next, 3 years from now, it'll be in June. And it just keeps on moving up in the year because it's strictly a 12-month lunar calendar. It's, again, and so it doesn't reflect the reality of what we see on the ground. And what we're looking for in a calendar, what I believe the scripture does support, is a calendar that is consistent with human rhythm. Now, women will tell you that their bodies are very much in cycle with the moon. Men are kind of ignorant about that. They don't see that their bodies are also, consistent with what happens in the moon. People who work in retail will tell you, when you get to a full moon, everybody goes nuts, right? You got full moonitis happening, right?
It's true. We used to own an auction house, my husband and I, and you could see, when you deal with large groups of people on a regular basis, you can kind of predict certain things that do affect people's behavior. And
the full moon was one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And so what you see is you do see your body is in a natural rhythm. But you can't see that natural rhythm because you're looking for the blue moon, right? The second full moon in a month, right? Oh, well, this is the first day of the month. How can that possibly? That's totally inconsistent with what my biorhythm is doing, what my body rhythm is doing. It's totally inconsistent with it. It's just kind of, let's just clunk one down here. And on the other hand, you might have something that's completely consistent with the lunar schedule in the Islamic calendar, but it's totally inconsistent with the agricultural calendar. Right. 3 years from now, you're not going to plant in January. You're not going to plant in November, right? And so, eventually it gets back for a couple of months where you're kind of close, but you're not going to use that calendar for planting or understanding the agricultural aspects. Right. But we do have something that's going on here. We have this relationship that's telling us, look, the first month is going to be called Aviv because you're going to be giving a sheaf offering. You're going to do a wave offering. You're going to wave this sheaf. Okay. So speak unto the children of Yahshua, saying to them, when you come into the land, when I give you, you shall reap the harvest thereof. Then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priests, and he shall wave it. Get out the sheaf, bringing in the sheaves, right. Bringing in the sheaves.
And it's of barley, right?
Well, that's what we believe. Barley. It's a barley, right? But you have to keep in mind that barley is quite similar to wheat in its appearance, right? Now, the farmers know the difference between barley and wheat and alfalfa and so forth, but it's similar to wheat. And he shall wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you on the morrow after the regularly 7-count Shabbat. So, when was the 7-count Shabbat given? Genesis 1, right? And he completed his work on the 6th day, and on the 7th day he rested. And this is the model for you. And we talked about this a great deal in the last presentation about the continuous 7th-day Sabbath and about how it was a continuous 7 days even if the pattern of Judaism had forgotten it, it was still a 7-day pattern, Okay. But so on the morrow after Shabbat, so this means that this morrow after Shabbat is always what we now call Sunday. But in the Hebrew, it's not called Sunday at all. It's called Rishon.
Right? Rishon.
Okay. All right. Let's continue here. All right. You're seeing the screen now. Did I successfully share it? Okay. All right. Okay. So Exodus, Shemot, chapter 23, similar to Leviticus 23, tells us 3 times a year, you shall keep a feast unto me. 3 times you shall keep a feast unto me in the year. You shall guard the feast of Matzah. You shall eat matzah 7 days, as I commanded you, in the time appointed in the month of Aviv. For in it you came out of Mitzrayim, and none shall appear before me empty. Okay, what's the next feast? The feast of Katsir, and the first fruits of your labor, which you have sown in the field, and the feast of Asif, which is at the end of the year when you have gathered in your labors out of the field. Now, these are 2 words that appear in the Sefer. They don't appear anywhere else. And this is different. This is not Sukkot. This is not Shavuot. This is Katsir and Asif. Okay. So you have the first fruits of your labor, and then you have the labors out of the end of the year. Now, you people who are farmers, you know what I'm talking about. There comes a point when you're out there and you've got your crops, and you're trying to milk your crops for that last little bit, right? You want to get that last little bit out of it. And when you're not going to get that last little bit because you check the temperature and it's going to go 30 degrees tonight, right? So when it's going to go 30 degrees tonight, you're going to go out there and take what you can take. That is the last harvest. And then after that, after the first order, which you have sown in the field, and the feast of Asif, which is in the end of the year when you have gathered, that's past tense, when you have gathered in your labors out of the field, when you have gotten everything out of the garden, then you're going to have the feast of Asif. So 3 times in a year, all your males shall appear before Adonai Yahweh. No chametz shall be upon your offering of blood. Right? And so when you talk about offering yourself as a living sacrifice, no chametz, no leaven, no sin, right? And no fat of my feast shall remain until morning. The first of the first fruits of your land you shall bring into the house of Yahweh Eloheka. Okay, so I wanted to point this out because we have 2 words here that are worthy of knowing. Besides Katsir and Asif, we see the first down here, and this word is Rashith. And then we have the first fruits, which here is Bikur. Okay. The first of the first fruits, the first Reshith of the first fruits, Bikur of your land, you shall bring into the house of Yahweh Eloheka. Okay. So we're going to see 3 significant days in the first month of the year, which was called Aviv, not Nisan. Pesach, Matzah, Katsir. Okay. But there was another first fruits used to find the first month of the year. Are you ready for this one? Okay. Now, here we go. Enter the stars for the use of determining the appointed feasts. I have set the lights in the heavens for signs, for appointed feasts, for days and for years, and in particular, the constellation Virgo and the star of her offering hand called the Alpha Virginis, also known as Spica. Now, take a look at this. When you look at Virgo here, you can see something right here. Do you see that? She's holding a sheaf of barley or a sheaf of some kind. She's holding a sheaf in her hand, right, in this mock-up. And this is Spica. Now, I can tell you, last night, when I was at my son-in-law's house, we pulled up, the constellation viewer, and we're looking at Virgo, right? We're looking at Virgo, and it was very interesting because what did we see? We saw a line that was the celestial plane that was like this, okay? So this part here was visible, this part not visible. So here's Spica below the horizon, you see? Here's Spica below the horizon. This is what we could see of Virgo last night. We can't see Spica because it's below the horizon, right? Now, this is common when you go between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. You have, remember that when I talked before, you have the Earth and it's on an axial tilt. So the stars will come in this way and you'll see them. And then let's say they're just straight across. They come in this way, you see them, and then boom, you don't see them, right? Now, when the stars are up here, well, you see them all the time because they're right there. But here, nope, they disappear. And of course, my son-in-law he used to work in Australia. And he said he downloaded this app because they have a completely different set of constellations in the Southern Hemisphere, and they go the opposite direction. So when you're observing the stars in the Northern Hemisphere, they go clockwise. When you observe them in the Southern Hemisphere, they go counterclockwise. Okay. So I went and said, well, I want to go see what Spica looks like today. I want to go see what Virgo looks like today and see if we still have a similar. And so here's what I found today. I found all of Virgo out of view. All of it out of view. By the time I looked at it 12 hours later. Okay. Well, there is something that goes on, which is when this horizon line here, it moves. And this horizon line moves as we get later in the year. And eventually this horizon line is going to be here and Spica is going to be visible. And Spica, when it's visible, you're going to see what? You're going to see the wave offering. Okay. Right. All right. Now take a look. So Spica, Alpha Virginis is what it's called. It's the brightest star in the southern constellation of Virgo and the 16th brightest star in the sky. The name Spica, pronounced Spica, comes from the Latin phrase Spica Virginis, meaning Virgo's ear of grain. Right? That's what the name means, Virgo's ear of grain. The Latin word spicum refers to the ear of wheat Virgo holds in her left hand, the ear of wheat. Isn't that fascinating, right? Okay, there's Spica right there, okay? Now, also, by the way, that app that I named, when you actually find Virgo where it is, there's a little circle dot in the middle of the app, and you can put it, when you center it over one of the stars, it tells you what the name of the star is and gives you a little information about it. Okay, so I'm learning more about the constellations as we go, right? There's 88 constellations that are visible to the human eye. And these are discussed quite often as the Matzah wrote in the book of Job and the book of Ezekiel. But we see that we have two completely different sets of constellations in the summer and the winter in the northern sky, right? So this is the summer sky that we see here. Now, of course, in Alaska, we see this all the time, right? And so the Alaskan flag, in fact, is Ursa Major. It's Ursa Major. And, which is this set of stars here. We have it on the Alaska flag. And then here's Ursa Minor, which is going to point to the stars of Ursa Major. Okay, so this is in the northern sky, but you can see, we see a little bit of Cancer here, we see a little bit of Pisces, we see a little bit of Perseus, we see some Andromeda strain, and so on and so forth. Okay, nice. Well, what do we see in the winter? We see, this is what Job is describing, was what he saw in the winter, right? Because there are the Pleiades. Now, do you know what the other name for Pleiades is? Subaru. That's why their logo is the stars. Subaru, yeah. And you can see, all of a sudden, now we're seeing Orion, seeing Monoceros, right? We're seeing, Canis Major. We're seeing Eridanus, seeing all of these. See, these are winter constellations that we see. They're different than the summer constellations that we see. Okay. And these are here. These are here for a reason. They're here for signs and for the appointed feasts and for days and for years.
While you're on this slide, see Draco way up there? When this whole thing started, and we were dealing with the snake. It's way up to where it's hard to see. And the whole thing, I kept hearing this kind of from the Ruach. It's Draco. It's this hidden snake, this
Yeah.
hidden snake, and think about it, draconian.
Draconian. Yeah. Sure.
Draconian.
Big word, right? And
Right.
telling us that it is draconian, it's serpent-like, right?
Right.
And we know that Draco, in the sign of September 23rd, 2017, we had Virgo, and of course, the planets aligned to show Jupiter, exiting the womb of Virgo, with also the planets in alignment in Leo to give us 12 stars in her hair. And then Draco was at her feet, and Michael was above Draco. So the whole of the Revelation 12 sign was given in the heavens. And so this is why when we start to study this, and hopefully we're going to be able to present, teaching on Mazarot on Sefer Academy as well. I'm really looking forward to that. But we can see here that this kind of thing, this is why this kind of study is, and remember, we differ between astronomy and astrology. Astrology is the logic of the stars. Astronomy is the law of the stars. Astronomos, right? Nomos, Greek word for law. Astrologos, the words or the logic of the stars. Okay. Yeah. All right, now, but let's take a look. Let's bomb over here and get into the winter sky, or get into the southern sky. Okay. So, this is the stars in the far north. Okay. Always visible, right? We don't lose sight of them. These are always visible. But you can see that the reason they're visible, I'm just going to show this. Now, again, a lot of people say, well, this is an absolutely ludicrous slide because you're showing a spherical Earth orbiting. But I can tell you, when we talk about the physics on the star Spica, that's actually two stars, and they have observed it, right? It's bright enough in the sky to observe. And they say those two stars, right, are actually orbiting each other like this, right? And they're orbiting at a rate of speed at 19 kilometers per second. Okay? So we see here again, we can see that we have a celestial equator, that this is reflecting what? This is reflecting an axial tilt. See, this would put us on the celestial plane, but we're at an axial tilt of 23 degrees, which then is, if there was no axial tilt given this model, okay, let's just take the model that we're talking about, the Earth rotating and orbiting around the sun. And let's say there was no axial tilt. It was just flat, right? There would be no seasons. If you lived in the northern part of the globe, you're going to be cold all the time, period. There's no season. You're just cold. And if you're at the equator, you're just hot. There's no season. There's just this. So the seasons under this model are dictated by the axial tilt and how that tilt reflects to the sun. And so as a result of this, because the axial tilt is like this, you have stars that are passing like this. Okay. Here, let me show you. And let's do it with an arrow here. This one. So we have stars that are passing like this. So when we have stars that are passing like this, you can see that you can't see that star until that star reaches here. And when the star gets to here, you're done seeing it. But when you have a star that's up here like this, that's unfair, because let's face it, that's not a straight line. Let's put a straight line there. If you have stars that are up here, you can see them all the time, 100% of the time, see, and notwithstanding this tilt. And so anyway, this is some of the stuff. I'm just showing you guys this because this is the kind of physics this is the kind of stuff that's understood by people who do a lot of astronomy, who do a lot of this stuff in reckoning. And so they talk about things like the elliptic. You see, you have, if you look at this, you'll see, wait, let me get this. If you look at this, you'll see you have an elliptic, right? This is the elliptic. You see the elliptic is like, shows us on a celestial plane here. Very flat, very even, the elliptic. But when you look at the celestial equator, this is off, right? This is weird. This is at a tilt, you see? And so they call this the celestial equator, which comports with the equator around the Earth. And then we have what's called the right ascension, that this is moving this way. Now, when we talk about the stars, right? So what you see is these are going clockwise, right? By doing this. But the earth is moving this way down here too. The only problem is the stars appear counterclockwise. They appear counterclockwise. Now, some people might look at this and say, well, it's clear to me, Dr. P, that this is a dome that surrounds the earth. Okay, well, it may be a dome that surrounds the earth, but it doesn't surround half the earth. It surrounds all the earth, right? Okay, I'm not going to get into it any farther than that, but just to show you what is the generally accepted model of the physics concerning what's going on with the constellations, and to try to explain why we can see some constellations all the time, some of the time, and when we're in the northern hemisphere, we can't see the constellations in the southern hemisphere at all, and they can't see the northern constellations. And it's really quite a difference when you live in the south. You see something entirely different. Okay, so here we are. The best time to observe Spica is from the spring to late summer. Oh, boom. The star emerges on the horizon in the east-southeast at sunset in the early spring, at the time of the barley offering, and can be seen throughout the night. So Spica can be found at its highest point to the south in the early evening about 2 months later. By late August, it can only be seen for a short period after sunset in the west-southwestern sky, right? And for our purposes, so that we know, this one right here is Spica, okay? All right. So Alpha Virginis Spica is believed to be one of the brightest stars that made it possible for Hipparchus in 160, 120 BC to discover the precession of the equinoxes. So Spica, by observing the stars, gave him a clue as to the equinoxes after comparing his data to that of the Alexandrian Timochares, who had observed Spica and Regulus around 300 BC. So we see the link between the wheat in the hand of Virgo and the vernal equinox, both signaling the first month of the year. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read these, and I'm going to stop the share a little bit so people can see me a little bit. So here we go with this discussion from Shemot, Exodus, chapter 9, verse 31 to 32. And the flax and the barley was smitten, for the barley was in the ear, right? And the flax was bold, but the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. Okay, so we know we're distinguishing between wheat and rye. They're not here, but barley and flax are. Now, I got to tell you, flax, I got into flax. I thought flax was the coolest thing I'd ever heard of, right? Because you know who the top producer of flax in the world is right now? It's Russia.
Russia.
Yeah, because it grows in, guess what, a winter climate. And who was the top producer before? It used to be Ireland. And what is made from flax? Linen. Linen is spun flax, right? And so here you can see it. So I thought flax was just the cat's meow, right? This is cool
something.
Stuff.
You know something really cool about flax? Here's a little baking tidbit. If you're out of eggs, take it's approximately tablespoon and a half or so of flax, grind it up, add a little water to it, an egg replacement right there.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Wow, now that's
it has
cool.
The same consistency as an egg when you grind it and add some water so that you can bake with it.
So you use that. So if you've got somebody who doesn't like to eat eggs, or if you're vegan or somebody like that, and you're wanting to put together some bread that has no dairy in it, you can use flax as a replacement.
Exactly.
Well, that you're talking about flax seed.
Yes.
Flax seed. Yeah. So you take flax seed, grind it, and then boom, here you go. Right.
Yeah.
Very good tip. Right. So we're seeing here that the first month of the year is consistent with that time when the flax and barley are smitten, and Spica arrives on the horizon at the time of the vernal equinox, which these guys were able to prove in the 3rd and 4th centuries BC. Okay, so let's go back to a share screen here, and let's take a look at these fantastic graphics. Right. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Steve.
It's a great presentation.
Well, thank you, Shelley. So, blow the shofar on the dark new moon today on our solemn feast. Now, we've had a lot of discussion about this question of dark new moon, right? And some people say, kaseh, that means fat and plumpy, or the appointed time. But kaseh That's only two places in scripture. Kasa, covered, which is spelled exactly the same way, appears 89 times, meaning covered, right? So then we have this anomaly. Oh no, same spelling. We put some different sounds to it so that you guys could never find the first day of the month. We'll just go ahead and put a couple of sere in there, maybe a segol, and yeah, guess what? You guys are lost. That's it. You're never going to find the first day of the month. Even though the word appears everywhere else in scripture 89 times, pretty obvious, dark, covered, right? So blow the shofar on the dark new moon today on our solemn feast. Okay. So watch this. Let's just kind of play with this graphic a little bit. First month, right? The dark moon on the first of the month. That's over here, right? Okay. The full moon then is the 15th of the month, generally speaking. Then we see what? The vernal equinox. So when we're talking about the first month, the vernal equinox has to appear between the dark moon and the full moon. If it appears after the full moon, that's not the first month. That's going to be in the next month. If it appears before the full moon, then this becomes the first month of the year with the vernal equinox. Okay. Now, some people take the point of view that, oh no, it's the next month after that. Once you have the vernal equinox here, then you don't start your count till you get over here. Well, that always puts them out of the ripeness of Aviv. That always puts them out of the reach of Spica. They're always out. And then the wheat harvest is late. Then the spring, the fall is late. Everything's late. Okay. Matzah is the 15th through the 21st. So you see here with Matzah, we have this idea that Matzah is going to be from the 15th here on out to the 21st. Now, if we're looking at the moon cycle, right, we know that 7.5 days later is going to be the half moon. There's the half moon. And this is not always, but generally speaking, the half moon. So there's the half moon. So that's Matzah right there. It goes from the 15th, goes from the full moon to the quarter moon. Then we have Katsir right after that. Oh, let's do Katsir here, right? Okay, thanks for bringing in Katsir. All right, okay. Let's clear these drawings before I get into trouble. Hence, what? What do we know now about the first month? The sun, the vernal equinox, the moon, the dark moon, and the stars, Spica, in the heavens, they fix the appointed times. You see that? For the first time, we see that the sun, the moon, and also the stars fix the appointed times. Okay, now let's see if we can understand this, because now it's going to get complicated. Wait a minute, I got to get my slide rule. See, Shelley took off to go get her slide rule. So now I'm not going to be able to do the presentation until she gets back here with her slide rule. No, I'm going to go ahead and start it until she comes back. But here we say what? We see that Matzah has the possibility in a fixed Sabbath arrangement. Matzah has the possibility of falling on a Monday, falling on a Tuesday, falling on a Wednesday, falling on a Thursday, falling on a Friday, falling on a Saturday, falling on a Sunday. Now, for guys who practice the lunar Sabbath, this is absolutely and catatonically unacceptable. No, the new moon, then the first Sabbath, and then the 8 days of Sabbath, and then the 15th is a Sabbath, and that's why it's always fixed, and that's why. But even the guys who say, well, let's do a 364 calendar with a leap day, the first month looks pretty good, man. You've got, the first day, okay, we're going to renew the Sabbath here. We're going to have the first day of the year, Rosh Hashanah. Then we're going to have a Sabbath, and then it's going to be the 8th day, and then it's going to be the 15th day. Now, so we've got the Shabbat, boom, boom, boom. It fits the first month like a glove. Second month, not so good. Third month, we're a little bit out. Seventh month, you can't find it without the written calendar, right? But here we see in a fixed Sabbath, that is to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, do it again, right? You know what they say, Shelley? Do you know why ballet dancers always go 5, 6, 7, 8 when they're going to start the dance?
No, I don't.
Because musicians took up 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what happened. Okay.
There you go.
bad situation. Anyway, so what we see here is this. In the fixed Sabbath arena, we have a possibility that there is a seventh-day Sabbath somewhere that could be in the sixth day of the week, could be in the fifth day of the week, the fourth day, the third day, the second day, even the first day of the week, or even the last day of the week, right? Any of these are possible in Matzah. Now, so when you do this, this means what? You could have the Sabbath and the Sabbath. For instance, we know that the first day of Matzah is a Sabbath. This is a Sabbath, right? And we know the last day of Matzah is a Sabbath. That's a Sabbath. And you can have a Sabbath just before that, right? That's possible. That is possible. Okay. So we can see here that under these circumstances, what do we know? We know that the first Sabbath is here. Now, this is a term of art. And this is where we really got into it in the Sefer, because you're not going to find this in other scriptures. But this doctrine of Mia Sabbaton, which would say first Sabbath, right? Mia being the adjective modifying Sabbaton. Well, people look at that and say, well, Sabbath, that can't mean first Sabbath. That means first day of the week. Because even though Sabbaton appears 87 times in scripture, and of those 80 times, it is translated as Shabbat. You know, I mean, I'm telling you, Paul did not go to the synagogues on Friday, and he didn't go to the synagogues on the first day of the week, right? So they couldn't change that. So when you see Paul going onto the Sabbath, when you see Mashiach going to the synagogue on the Sabbath, the word there in the Greek, Sabbaton, 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 and now all of a sudden, in 7 places, it becomes the first day of the week. Only one of those places do you have the word first in the passage. And it's right here in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 16:2. Okay, all right, well, thanks. And what you see is what? Oh, on the first day of the week, right? This means what? Paul's coming by and say, okay, let every one of you lay by him in store as Elohim has prospered him. So I can gather that stuff. I can gather all that money on the first day of the week, right? Because I don't want any gatherings when I get there. I want you guys to have taken care of it, right? On the first day of the week, right? And then that way we know that we've got this instruction that we can gather up the tithe and the offerings on the first day of the week over and over and over again, which everybody knows is Sunday. So we get together on the first day of the week and we gather up the offerings and we gather more, as Elohim has prospered you, cough up, right? Well, wait a minute. Just hold up here. When you look at it for what it is, no. Upon the first Shabbat, let every one of you lay up him in store. Now, it's my position that this is the first Shabbat. Okay? This is the first Shabbat from which we start counting. Now, people in the 364-day calendar may say, wait a minute, that's not the first Shabbat. The first Shabbat is day 2 of the month of Aviv. Now, if you count that, that's going to put Shavuot right up in tight, right? Because you're going to be counting 2 weeks. In fact, you're going to be on your 3rd Sabbath by the time you get to the end of Matzah. So you only have 1 month to go before you reach Shavuot, if that's your position. Okay? Well, I don't think so. I think this is the first Shabbat. Why do I think that? Because there's a second Shabbat. There's a second Shabbat in the scripture, right? Which is right here in Luke 6:1. And it came to pass on the second Shabbat, after the first. Now, this word in the Greek is deuteroproto, right? Which means the second after the first, right? Deuteroproto. Okay, it came to pass on the second Sabbath, after the first, that would be Mashiach, went through the fields, and the Talmudim did what? They plucked the heads of grain. This means that the grain is ripe, right? Well, if you say, well, the first Sabbath is over there, then how are you going to have the grain offering when it comes to this point, when you get to, this Reshith or Katsir? How do you do that? Well, and then here, this is totally consistent. If this is the first Shabbat, this would be the grain offering here. This is the first Shabbat here. This is the grain offering here. Now we only have 6 days to go before we get to the second Shabbat. And guess what? They're still finding grain in the field. We're still finding grain. Hey, there's still grain here. Let's go out there and pluck some of the heads and eat that. Oh, wait a minute. Hey. And they did what? They were eating it, rubbing them in their hands. You know, when you have ripe grain, you know, you can just rub it right in your hands, right? And away it comes, right? So here you have, and you know, it took me a long time to discover the fact that there's a first Sabbath and a second Sabbath, but here they are, and they're both in the New Testament, right? Both in the New Testament telling you this is what the deal is. Okay, well, great. So what we see now, Katsir is this, the wave offering is going to be the day after. So Katsir in a fixed seventh-day Sabbath is always on a Sunday, which Sunday is a Roman name. That isn't the name that you find in the Hebrew. We're going to get to those names because we know, in fact, I think I taught on it last week. We talked about Rishon being the first day of the week, Sheni, Shelishi, Revi'i, Hamashi, Shishi, right? These were the names of the weeks. And then Savi, right? Sabati, Savi, the Sabbath, right? Okay. All right, so let's continue. Now here in Leviticus 23, and ye shall count unto you from the morrow after the Shabbat. Oh, okay. So the morrow after the Shabbat, from the day that you brought the sheaf of the wave offering. Oh, okay. 7 Shabbats shall be complete. Even unto the morrow after the 7th Shabbat shall ye number 50 days, and ye shall offer a renewed oblation unto Yahuah. Ye shall bring out of your habitations 2 wave loaves. Okay, guys, here it is right here. 2 wave loaves. So if you want to do some stuff for Shavuot, show up with 2 loaves, right? And 2 tenth deals. They shall be of fine flour. And guess what? They shall be baked with leaven. Break out the bread, right? Come on, Shelley. Right now, I'm smelling homemade bread. You know what I'm talking about? You pull that homemade bread out of the oven.
I love to make challah. I love to bake challah.
It smells so good, and it's just like, especially right out of the oven, right?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness,
There's nothing like it.
Yeah. And these are the first fruits unto Yahuah. Okay, boom. Interesting. All right. Now this is going to be called Shavuot. Let's take a look. Shavuot, right? All right. Now, when we talk about Shavuot, we can see here kind of the similar kind of formula that we're going to count up 7 weeks, right? This is based on a fixed 7th-day Sabbath. Again, upon the first Shabbat, let every one of you lay up him in store as Elohim has prospered him. That's here, that there be no gatherings when I come. So here we have the first Shabbat here. And then, of course, we have the wave offering, Katsir, of the first fruits here. So we're going to start our 7-week count after this, okay? We're going to start it after this. So we count Rishon, Sheni, Shelishi, Revi'i, Chamishi, Shishi, Shavi in the 7th week, and the day after the 7th Sabbath is the 50th day, 7 times 7 being 49. Then the Sunday is going to be Shavuot. Sheva being 7, Shavuot 7s, 7 sevens, Shavuot 7 sevens, right? The plural of 7s. Okay, so we can see this formula here, and it kind of works out, kind of cool, really, when you think about it, because this is also going to tell us, it's also going to be a microcosm of what we do in the Jubilee year, right? Which we're not talking about here. We haven't talked about the sabbatical year, the Shemitah, and we haven't talked about the Jubilee year. Now, the Shemitah, the 7th year, is to be a 7th year of rest, just like there was a 7th day of rest, and there's a 7th year of rest. And just as you do 7 weeks here, and then on the 50th day you rest, so you have 7 weeks of years, or 49 years, and on the 50th year you rest. Okay?
Can you imagine having a whole year of rest? To live in a society that you really rested a whole year?
Well, and then when you pop into a Jubilee year, you're resting for 2 years.
2 years?
What are you guys doing? Lounge lizard. I'm a lounge lizard here for the next year. No, I'll tell you, there's a guy in Israel, Don Esposito. He has his team, and they live up at Guinnessar on Sea of Galilee. And he told them, look, if you cannot, this is a coming Shemitah year coming up next year, and then it's going to be a Jubilee year after that. If you don't have the resources to live for those 2 years, you have to leave. You can't stay in this camp because we're not going to be doing anything. You can't be raising any money during these next 2 years. You have to rest. And it's not just rest, you don't sit down and become a vegetable,
Right.
but you stop working.
Right.
And you spend your time with Yah. You stop working, it's like a Shabbat, right?
Yeah.
Eat, drink, and bless Yah, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Yasharel, saying, in the seventh month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Shabbat and a memorial of blowing shofars. Well, isn't that what David told us? That blow the shofar on the dark moon, right, at our solemn feast. Oh, okay. So the solemn feast is going to be a feast that's going to be on the first day of the month. Well, we've got one here. Okay, on the first day of the month, have a Sabbath. Oh, okay. All right, that sounds good. A memorial of blowing shofars. Okay, well, let's see. What kind of sounds should we blow through the shofars? Well, let's use a couple of different kinds of sounds. We can use the tekiah and we can use the teruma, right? Or the teruah, right? So let's use those. We'll use the ba, 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 right? The tekiah, ba, 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 and we're going to use the teruah, right? So these are the sounds. And so what is this called? Yom Teruah. So, and don't do any servile work there. And offer an offering here on the first day. Okay, all right. So that sounds a lot very consistent with Psalm 81:3. So what do we see? The seventh month, we see, okay, first day, Yom Teruah. Why is it called Yom Teruah? Does Teruah mean trumpet? No, shofar means trumpet. Teruah is the kind of trumpet blast or the shout out. Let's give a shout out for the first day of the seventh month. Let's have a shout out on that. Or a trumpet blast on that, Yom Teruah, right? Okay. How about the 10th day? Well, that's Yom Kippur. Then when we get to the 15th day, we're going to have the Feast of Tabernacles that's going to go on here for 7 days, right? 15th day through the 21st day, Feast of Tabernacles. Okay, all right. And then Shemini Azeret, or what's called the last great day. Okay. So, and Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Yasharel, saying, in the seventh month, in the first day of the month, shall ye have a Shabbat, memorial of blowing shofars, a holy assembly. Ye shall do no servile work, but they shall make an offering unto fire unto Yahweh. Okay, now what? Well, how about Yom Kippur? Here it is, which is the day of covering, Kippur, Kippurim, covers, right? And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, also on the 10th day of the seventh month, on the 10th day, is Yom Kippurim. It shall be a holy assembly unto you. Okay, there's the holy assembly. You shall afflict your souls and offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh, and you shall do no work in that same day. It is Yom Kippurim to make an atonement, or the Day of Atonement, it's called in English, for you before Yahweh Elohim. For whatsoever soul it be that shall not be afflicted in that same day, he shall be cut off from among his people. Well, if you're not afflicted, you're having a party over there. You're out. You can't come back. You're out. You can't hang out with us anymore. And whatsoever soul it be that does any work in that same day, that same soul I will destroy from among his people. Did you really go back to work on Yom Kippur? Well, I had some stuff I needed to get done at the office. No, you didn't. Ye shall do no manner of work. Don't make any copies. Don't do that last minute errand. No manner of work. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations and all your dwellings. It shall be unto you a Shabbat of rest. Hey, this is horrible. This is legalism. You keep imposing legalism on us, Steve, because you just want us to rest. And that's legalism. Right?
That's hysterical. What a burden, right?
said the average American workaholic. What do you do for a living? I work 24/7, 365. Now shut your face, right?
Exactly.
Right. Okay. But here, then you come in and say, well, you should take some rest. Huh? Yeah. The Shabbat, rest. Oh, well, that's legalism, right? And ye shall afflict your souls. Now look at this. Here we go, right? You shall afflict your souls from in the 9th day of the month at evening. Oh, so we start this on the 10th day of the month which begins here at the evening. No, it's the 9th day of the month. It's the evening of the 9th day of the month. See it? It's the evening of the 9th day of the month. See, this is the 9th day of the month. Then you get to the 10th day of the month, the following morning, and do you continue all the way through the night into the 11th day? No, no, no. When you go to bed on the 10th day, Yom Kippur is over. It only goes through the evening. Okay? Shall ye celebrate your Shabbat? So what's this tell you? This tells you, okay, 9th day, lunch. Let's get lunch, right? Because tomorrow is going to be an affliction of the soul. So we can hurry around the office. We can get all this stuff done, get the FedEx out. You know what I'm talking about? You got to get all the stuff you want to get done. Get that all done. Even. Nope, we're done. Even. We hit it. Following day. Okay. Celebrate the Shabbat. Rest. Be afflicted. All of this. Then when this evening is over, when? Does this mean, hey, it's 6 o'clock. We hit evening. Let's get back into the office and pick up. Go to bed. Go to bed, right? Here's the bed here. We'll put a little headboard here, a little footboard. And then we can put the dog up here in case you have the Okay, but there you go, right? So this is Yom Kippur. All right. Now, Yom Teruah, Feast of Trumpets, Yom Kippur, Feast of Atonement. Okay. Now, and Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Yahshua. Okay, hold on. Let me bounce out of this for just 1 second. I'll stop the screen share so maybe I can read this thing and so people can, actually see my face, read it. We think you're lip syncing over there, Steve. Right?
That's right.
Yeah, I've got Milli Vanilli in here lip syncing the part, right? That's why I keep my head small so Milli Vanilli can sing it. And Yahweh spoke unto Moshe, saying, speak unto the children of Yasharel, saying, the 15th day of this 7th month shall be the feast of Sukkot. For 7 days unto Yahweh. On the first day shall be a holy assembly. Okay, holy assembly, first day. You shall do no servile work therein. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. Now what? Oh, on the 8th day shall be a holy assembly unto you. 8 days shall be a holy assembly unto you, and you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. It is a solemn assembly, and ye shall do no servile work therein. These are the feasts of Yahweh, which ye shall proclaim to be holy assemblies, to offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh, an ascending smoke offering, and an oblation, a sacrifice, and drink offerings, everything upon his day. Beside the Shabbats of Yahweh, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your free will offerings, which ye give unto Yahweh. Okay. All right. Let me go back to a share screen here, and let's see if I can figure this out. Okay. Here we go. We got it right here. We got it going. Okay. So what do we see? Vayikra, Leviticus 23:36. 7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahweh. On the 8th day shall be a holy assembly. Now here, we're going to see the word here for holy assembly, which becomes important because we're not talking about a Moedim. We're talking about here, Mikra Kodesh. Now this is what appears. This is exactly what appears in the text. Mikra Kodesh, okay, which is translated as a holy assembly, right? And of course, if we were to look at this as a prefix, right, then it becomes from kara, calling out, from calling out, right? Kara. Mikra Kodesh, unto you, and ye shall offer an offering made by fire to Yahweh. It is a solemn assembly. Well, here, that word is atzaret. Atzaret. And ye shall do no servile work therein. So, also in the 15th day, this is from Vayikra, again, 23:39. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, Ye shall keep a feast unto Yahweh for 7 days. On the first day shall be a Shabbat, and on the 8th day, not the 7th, but on the 8th day shall be a Shabbat. Okay, nice. All right. So far we're getting along there pretty well. So this is a discussion of the day Shemini Atzeret, the last great day, it's called. Okay, so what about this last great day? So is this something that's really kind of something that we should be doing? We legalists who want to take these days as a rest and kind of respect these feasts, you bunch of legalists over here. Should we be doing these? Well, let's take a look and let's see what scripture has to say. So we're going to see something here that's an example of this when Shalamah was dedicating the first temple, not the second temple, the first temple. And he said, okay, well, I'm going to dedicate the temple and I'm going to keep the feast for 7 days. Well, is this really the same feast? Yeah, you're going to find out that what? On the 23rd day of the 7th month, okay? This wasn't the 9th month. This was the 7th month. On the 7th month, on the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people away to their tents. All right, now look, let's just count it up, right? So if we start on the 15th, that's 1. Then the 16th, that's 2. The 17th, that's 3. 18th, that's 4. 19th, that's 5. 20, that's 6. 21, that's 7 days. Okay, so 21. All right, well, how come he's sending them home on the 23rd? Because the last great day is the 22nd. On the 20th, look, we're going to have the feast for 7 days, and then we're going to have the 8th day. We're going to have this feast on the 8th day, and then on the day after that, hit the road, get out of Jerusalem, right? You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, right? Okay, all right. So what we see is what? Now let's take a look and see what this looks like. So Shalom kept the feast for 7 days, and all of Israel, a very great assembly, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Mitzrayim, and in the 8th day, that would be Shemini, the 8th day, Shemini, right? They made a solemn assembly at Saret. And for they kept the dedication of the temple, which is where you find the word what? Hanukkah. Right? So you can see that the dedication, this feast of dedication that was taking place here, even though this was Sukkot, well, the dedication aspect of it was called Hanukkah, named after Hanok, Enoch, right? Yeah, Hanukkah is named after Hanok. Hanok means the dedicated one. Hanukkah, the feminine noun, now is going to be talking about dedication, right? Okay, different tense. Hanukkah. Actually, this is actually Hanukkat, because here we have a tav, not a hey. Of the altar for 7 days and the feast for 7 days. And on the 23rd day of the 7th month, goodbye, he sent the people away unto their tents, and they were glad and merry in heart for the goodness that Yahweh had showed unto David and to Shalamah and to Yasharel, his people. Nice. So we see that Shemini Atzeret is a feast, right? That Sukkot is a feast. This is a feast. This is a time of celebration. This is not a time you atone for yourself on the 10th day. When you get to Sukkot, this is a time of feast. This is a time of booths. This is a time of celebrating, being in fellowship with one another and celebrating, right? And on the 8th day in particular, a huge feast. Okay, so now the question becomes, well, did Mashiach practice this feast? No, he didn't, because he was set free from this legalism. So he never did any of this. He didn't go to the synagogue on the Sabbath, as was his custom, like it says in Luke 4. That didn't happen. He didn't celebrate Pesach. That's why there was no Last Supper. Oh, wait a minute. There was a Last Supper, and that was on Pesach. And it was on the even of the 14th day, which is exactly what Moshe says. Not the even of the 15th day, where we get these wives' tales about the lamb being sacrificed on the day of the 15th and all this other stuff. No, that stuff is not accurate. The lamb was to be slaughtered on the even of the 14th. Keep it until the even of the 14th, okay? But we say this, okay, well, let's find out. In the last day, that great day of the feast. Oh, so are you trying to tell me that we have the last great day? Yeah. And here it is in the Gospel of John, right? Right here, telling us. Yeah. So Yahusha was there. He was there celebrating the last great day. Yahusha stood up and cried, "Hey, if any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink. He that believes on me, as the scripture has said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water." What did he tell the woman at the well? I have water that for which you drink, you will never thirst again, right? And what was he speaking of? Well, here they're going to tell us. But this spoke he of the Ruach, which they that believe on him should receive, for the Ruach HaKodesh was not yet given, because Yahusha was not yet glorified. Oh, okay, all right, okay, all right. So we see very clear evidence that Mashiach did in fact keep that feast. Boom. All right. Shemini Atzeret, the last great day. Okay. Sometimes it's also called Simchat Torah because they celebrate, hey, we finally finished reading the Torah portion. And in my case, it'll be, I finally finished recording the Torah portion. Let's have a feast, right? Egads, man. Okay. So when was the month first recognized in Scripture? When do we find first evidence that somebody was calculating a month? Well, it's right here. This is going to go all the way back to Genesis chapter 7, when we see somebody actually talking about a month. Now, remember that all of modernity starts with what? The flood. Before the flood, we have the antediluvian period, about which we didn't know anything before. Now, guess what? We're learning a whole bunch about the flood that we didn't know from before. Now we're learning a bunch about it. Okay. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, right? And again here, we're seeing, Chodesh, the second month, Chodesh, the 17th day of that month, Chodesh, the same day where all the fountains of the great deep broke up and all the windows of heaven were opened. And the rain was upon the earth 40 days and 40 nights. In the self same day entered Noah and Shem and Ham and Japhet, the sons of Noah and Noah's woman, and the three women of his sons with them into the ark, right? This was on, now here you have a very clear, this is absolute clear as it can be. The 17th day. This means that they were counting the days. At the time of Noah, they were counting the days, and they were reckoning the months, and they were calling the months Chodesh. Okay. Now we talk about Chodesh. Let's look at this. Chodesh here. Now, Strong's tells us, well, Chodesh means, well, that's clear. That means the new moon. I mean, what more do you need to say? That's it. New moon. Thank you. We're done. Strong's is finished. That's it. Go home. Or you could say, well, it means a month, or it could mean, even monthly. Well, and it also means, in case we didn't tell you up here, new moon. Right? That's the kind of information you're getting here, right? But it's from Hadash. Hadash. This is the primitive root. Okay, so when I look at Chodesh, I'm seeing Het Dalet Shin. When I look at Hadash, I'm seeing Het Dalet Shin. Right? Oh, wait a minute. It's different. Just hold up, Steve. It's different because we've got Nikudot, our Masoretic opinion, which changed this word here from this down here. This is different down here because we Masoretes changed it. Right? In the block script, San Nikudot, oh no, I'm sorry. They look exactly the same. All right. But Hadash is telling us what? Hadash is telling us it's a primitive root meaning to be new or renewed. Causatively, to rebuild, to renew, to repair. Now, when you talk about Chodesh, Chodesh is not Yiriak. Yiriak is moon. Chodesh, like we talked about before with the Dalet, right? Shelley, here, just a minute, let me stop the share for a second. when we were talking about the Dalet, you know that we were talking about the idea that the Dalet is not the door. It's the entrance. It's the portal. It's the place where you go in and come out. You know, it has nothing to do with a 6-panel door or anything like that, right? Now, we see the same thing here with Chodesh. We're not talking about the moon. We're talking about the cycle of the moon. Now, you could say, well, you know, Steve, Chadash means new. Okay, so when it says in Scripture, new moon, let's take the hard English. New moon. Clearly, that means new. Now, either you believe Scripture or you don't. That means that at the end of the month, this particular orb that we have given the light at the night, that thing has been shipped out. That one, you know, we're moving that thing back out to that goes to the used moon department, you know, on the outside of Saturn, and we're bringing in a brand new moon. Well, coincidentally, this one has got the same kind of, you know, crater pattern that the last one had. That's only because they're manufactured at the same shop, mass-produced, moon. We ship this one in, that one goes out, this one comes in, right? No, that's not what it means, right? It means a renewed cycle of the moon.
Right.
And we can see that very clearly. You can observe it with your eyes. That's the same moon that was in the sky when you were born. Same moon.
Yeah. So
same moon that was in the sky when you
follow the pattern that the Creator set forth, the pattern of life.
Yeah, there it is. And so we see this pattern is called Chadash, right? And so we talk about the new moon, Chodesh. We're talking about not the moon, but the moon cycle.
Right.
And Chodesh, the renewed moon cycle. And it begins with the dark moon. So at the dark moon, and then you can say, oh no, the moon cycle begins on the quarter. So we've got 4 choices here. The moon cycle can begin on the dark moon. It can begin on the first quarter.
Right.
It can begin on the full moon, or it can begin on the second quarter. Right.
Right.
So you take your pick. Now, in my opinion, what we see in Scripture, and the only place you have any marker at all in all of the Tanakh, is Psalm 81:3. It's the only marker you have. And in the Tanakh, Psalm 81:3, the dark, the covered moon, right?
Yeah.
And so 81:3 tells us it doesn't begin on the quarter moon, it doesn't begin on the full moon, it doesn't begin on the second quarter, it begins on the dark moon. Now, keep this in mind. People say, well, the day begins when we have daylight, not sunrise, but rather daylight. Okay, fine. So then what are you trying to say? That suddenly we have the night or the month beginning when it's just dark? Well, the dark moon, we had a red moon eclipse, and it was one of the longest red moon eclipses ever seen. I think it was a 4-hour eclipse.
Yeah, it was. I was able to see it from where we were at, and we walked out several times while it was going on and to see, and it was a long one.
It was a long eclipse, but at the end of that eclipse, the sliver moon comes out. And the sliver moon comes out on the same night that the dark moon is, because the dark moon is typically it's about 3 hours, 3.5 hours. Sometimes it's longer. Sometimes you get a real long one. But even so, at the end of the dark moon, the sliver moon comes up. And so we have this idea of daylight breaks, and here it is again, right? And so this is the beginning of the renewed moon cycle. Now, when you see this Chadash, what do we talk about in the New Testament? The New Testament, brand new. The New Testament, this New Testament is so new. Take your Old Testament, throw it in the trash. We're a New Testament church. We only need the New Testament. Well, how are you calling it new if there wasn't an old? Right? How did it become new? If there was no old, how did it become new? Well, we know that when you talk about in the Hebrew, how you'd refer to this, the same way you refer to a new moon, Chadash, right? And what are we talking about? We're talking about the renewed covenant, Brit, covenant, Brit, Chadasha, Brit Chadasha, the renewed covenant. So Mashiach says, Zeh Brit Chadasha Badami. This is the renewed covenant in my blood, right? Brit Chadasha. And Chadasha, renewed, is the root of the word Chodesh. Okay? All right. So I think I've covered that, except for that one part. Yeah, I left out that little slide part right there. All right. So let's go back to the share here. And let's see what we can find. Okay. So now so what are the names of the month? So I'm going to complete this by kind of giving us the names of the month. I'm going to kind of rattle through them quickly here because we're kind of running out of time. So here we are. The months on the holy calendar have names that are not, okay, and some people have discrepancies with holy. Well, you shouldn't use holy. You should use set apart. Well, set apart from what? You should use sacred. Well, sacred from what, right? No matter how you put it, you have some standard that you're kind of laying in there. So we're using holy here. And so what do we see? The calendar, not commonly known, even though they are the true calendars. So these are the names that we found inside scripture for these months. Okay, so you have Aviv, which means the green grain. Now, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Nisan, which means redemption. Vayikra, Leviticus 23:5, and Devarim 16:1 are the sources for Aviv. Okay, Ziv, the second month. Ziv means what? Bright flowers. When do you get bright flowers? You get bright flowers on a moving 360-day calendar that puts the beginning of the month in December, every sixth year? No. Bright flowers come out when? April, usually. Known in the modern Jewish calendar as Iyar, which means introspection or self-healing. Okay, the source for Ziv is Melachim, 1 Kings 6:1. Then the third month, Shelashi, which means what? Third. Known in the modern Jewish calendar as Sivan, which means the giving of the Torah. Well, okay, Divri Hayamin Rishon, 1 Chronicles 27:5, and Esther 8:9. Now, Sivan is very interesting because this month means the giving of the Torah, right? The giving of the Torah, third month, why? Because that's where it was Shavuot was practiced. Shavuot, Moses had the 10 commandments given on Shavuot. And 3,000 people died. And then when you have the Pentecost happen, which is again Shavuot in Acts, guess what? 3,000 people are saved, right? But it's the same day. Pentecost, Shavuot, Pentecost, Shavuot. Pentecost, 50 days, Shavuot, 7 sevens, right? Plus 1. All right. Next one. Fourth is Revi'i, or fourth month, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Tammuz. Tammuz, the Babylonian god, right? The son of Ishtar, which means the sin of worshiping false Elohim, right? And our source for fourth is Divrei Hayimim Rishon of 1 Chronicles 27:7. Okay, fifth month, Hamashi, fifth, right? Hamashi Chodesh, fifth month, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Av. Now, Av means father, right? Av, like Avi, right? Melachim Sheni, 2 Kings 25:8. Sixth month, Shishi, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Elul. Now, this Elul typically has 29 days, right? So if you're going to fast coming into Yom Kippur, there's 10 days coming into Yom Kippur, you fast for 29 days of Elul. Together, you fasted 40 days. So there's reason to believe, plenty of reason to believe, that the fast that's laid out in Luke 4, Mashiach went out into the wilderness and he fasted. He had neither drink nor eat nor food for 40 days. For 40 days. Then he comes to the synagogue, and as was his custom, and he reads Isaiah 61, proclaiming the acceptable year of Yah. Well, the Torah tells us that the Jubilee year can only be proclaimed on Yom Kippur. So it looks pretty clearly like what you're seeing in Luke 4 is Mashiach practicing a 40-day fast beginning in the beginning of this sixth month, Elul, and then keeping it all the way up to Yom Kippur, okay? Repentance, right? Elul means repentance. So here you see 40 days of repentance in this month of repentance, Elul, which in the scripture, before the Babylonian name came up, was just merely called the sixth month. Okay, seventh month. Now here you see clear indication in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 2, that the seventh month was called Etanim, which means ever-flowing streams, which means what? Rainy season came in and all the streams are running with water again, right? Etanim, the seventh month, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Tishri. And this is where they typically, the modern Jewish calendar, they celebrate Rosh Hashanah on the first day, which we call Yom Teruah. They call it Rosh Hashanah because they celebrate New Year on the seventh month. That's a Babylonian practice and is contrary to the plain speak of the Torah. Okay, eighth month, Bul. And of course, you see here a spelling that is not uncommon to Baal, right? But in this case, we have a Vav in the middle, and this means produce or rain. Okay, Bul. Okay, so when we hit the eighth month, guess what? Your field is full of stuff. Your garden's full of crops, right? And you're getting rain, right? Known in the modern Jewish calendar as Heshvan, which means the flood of Noah. Well, that's wrong, because we just read in Genesis when the flood actually took place, right? And the fact that the month was called Bul is established in 1 Kings 6:38. Okay, Teshii, meaning ninth, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Kislev. This is where you practice Hanukkah on the 25th day of Kislev, right? Hey, if these guys are going to do Kislev on the 25th day, then why don't we have Christmas on the 25th day of December, right? Right? And well, let's break out the 25th either way, which means restful sleep. Okay, you guys you picked all your crops. Everything's good. Now take a break, right? In Alaska, we used to call that unemployment. This is from Zechariah 7:1, right? Okay. And then we have, of course, 10th month, Asari, meaning 10th, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Tevet, which means divine grace. Divri Haimim Rishon, 1 Chronicles 27:13 says it's called the 10th. Then the 11th, Asar Ashteh, which means the 11th. But in the modern Jewish calendar, again, showing the Babylonian influence, Shabbat, which means the tree of life. Okay, our site, again, is from 27:14 in Chronicles. Then the 12th month, Asar Shenaim. Okay, so this means what? 10 plus 2, Asar Shenaim, which means the 12th, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Adar. And so Adar, which means strength. Why? Because this is the story of Esther, takes place in the month of Adar. So we used our source again, 1 Chronicles 27:15. And then there is an intercalary month that appears that adjusts the moon cycle to the solar equinox about every 3 years. And that 13th month is called Asar Shalosh, 13th, known in the modern Jewish calendar as Adar Sheni. So the modern Jewish calendar practices a 13th intercalary month, okay? Adar Sheni, which means renewed strength. Okay, so with that, Shelley, there's the month. See, there's my header right up there. Got it done. So,
Wow.
So there's our presentation on the season. So thank you, Shelley, for joining me on this presentation.
Oh, that was such a good presentation, and it really clears up because, I came into this thing a long time ago. 2002 is when I started coming into all of this, right? And the only thing that I had was, all the stuff that gave me the Jewish religion, and
Right.
And it made me feel like I went out of one thing swinging way over into something else, but both of it was out of balance. And the more that I have studied with you, and I'm getting rid of some of the religious tradition and digging into what is the scriptural information, it's freeing me up from all this stuff that, whether it came in from Babylon or whether it came in, from Assyria or Egypt, right?
Or Rome. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
or
yeah,
Rome.
yeah.
Yeah. The influence was there within the religiosity. And the thing that I love is, Yahusha says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. And we should be able to see that flowing through. It should make sense. It shouldn't cause chaos in our lives. And if we follow that natural rhythm, that natural progression as laid out by scripture and not religion, it's freeing. It's not a burden. It's
it
a
really
blessing.
is. And then the first thing you find out when you start keeping all the feasts is, man, do I have a lot of days off?
Yeah.
What am I going to do now? I got all these days off. Yeah. Well, I hope I answered a lot of questions on this. Let's see if we have any questions again. And we'll go over here to the, hey, thanks, Camilla. You bet. Let's see what we have in terms of questions. I'll see if I can find out anything. Okay,
I see one here. I see one here from Jeremy Cox. But he only read the first quarter. Okay. So the second is to come.
Yeah. And Jeremy, I'm not quite sure I understand that question. I wish I did. But yeah. And Jeremy's talking to me, he says the gospel in the first book. Okay. So yeah, so he likes some of that. So I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure what we have here, Jeremy. Okay. Let's see if anybody else has any questions, just feel free to type something in and we'll see. Okay. So I think we're doing all right. So guess what? You know what, Shelley?
What's
I
that?
answered every question on this presentation. There's nothing. There's nothing left. There's no stone left to open.
From olive to top.
Yeah. All right. Well, okay. Well, let's do this then. We'll go ahead and wrap it up. Let's see. Question:
Well,
how
here's
can the
something
wandering
here, yeah.
stars from Jude 1:13 be the planets if we had several planets show up for the Revelation 12 sign? Or any other thoughts on the wandering stars? Yeah, the wandering stars are probably not planets. And for all we know, the wandering stars, Scripture talks about stars. Like when you read in Revelation, it says the stars are angels, right? It says the 7 stars you saw in my hand are the angels, the Malachim, and the 7 menorahs you see are the 7 called out assemblies, right? So you have this metaphorical language that is immediately explained. But is it metaphorical, right? Because, we say, well, what about, we say, we have all this stuff about, what is a star? Well, we think it's gases, it depends on whether or not the angels were at the taco stand or not. But, we
the taco truck.
The taco truck, the roach coach, we used to call it the roach coach.
Pedro's roach coach.
Yeah. No, I mean, the thing is, when you're talking about like a powerful star like Spica, right, which is, I don't know, some 1,000 times brighter than our sun, and it's blue, it's not yellow, right? And it's actually 2 stars that are doing this fast circuit thing. When you see that kind of thing, you can see, well, the power of the heavens really kind of speaks in very dramatic levels. And so when we look at, what are the stars that Jude is talking about? Was he talking about planets? Was he talking about other stars? Was he talking about, meteorites? Was he talking about falling meteors, coming into the heavens when he was talking about wandering stars? Or was he talking about, and far more likely, was he talking about comets? Because those are clearly wandering. I had the beauty to see, what was the name of that comet that was in the heavens in the 90s? We were in South Carolina when it came through.
Oh, Hail Bob, wasn't
Hail
that?
Bob.
Yeah.
And that was just incredible to watch it come through. It was amazing,
Wasn't there something about that the last time it had come through was in Noah's day?
Yeah. And again, we have symbolism. We're seeing a lot of symbolism in the stars right now. Like, for instance, right now, there's this issue of Pluto, right? And Pluto showed up over the United States. The last time it showed up over the United States was July 4th, 1776. And it arrived over the United States on 2/22/2022.
Yeah. We were doing a broadcast right then. And there's a lot of people. I was listening to Mike Adams today, and of course he was saying that he believes that the war started on 2/22/22. This ramping up of the situation we're seeing in.
Yeah, and also we're also seeing some very interesting things that are happening in the U.S. Things are, in the secular world, they're coming unglued. In the spiritual world, we're just getting started, right? It's just kind of gelling up. So we're not going to get worried about. Okay, so Jessica says, if you would take a look up the thread a little bit there, and I'm gonna try to catch these questions down here. Okay. So Sherry asked the question, what do you have to say about the rules of postponement that the rabbis talk about? Well, again, this is, I think, that's legalism. I mean, you give the rabbis grief about legalism, right? But you have things that are going on where it's like, well, we can't have Pesach on this day, and we can't have like on the day of preparation, Pesach being the day of preparation, the 14th day cannot fall on a Saturday, on a Shabbat, right? Because then you can't have a preparation, right? So therefore we have to postpone. And so they postpone a week, or they push it out a week, or they push it out a month, or they do this, that, and the other thing. And they have their discussion points. I mean, a lot of the stuff that goes on in rabbinical reasoning is not as dumb as you think, right? They argue these things out, trying to figure out what to do and where do you go from there. All right. I mean, but I'm not in the midrash with those guys, so I'm not going to weigh in on the argument. All I can tell you is that from our point of view, if Pesach falls on the 14th, well, then you better get your prep done the day before, right? Because you have time to get it done. And there's nothing that prevents you from eating the Pesach on the even of the 14th. You just, when you're talking about preparing for it, though, you're going to have to do it earlier. And so here it is, right? So, you can have, you may look at this thing and say, well, gee, well, that's kind of weird, right? Okay, let's see what
Okay,
else we have.
here's another question. Out of Babylon, Homestead is asking, where did you find the Hebrew names for the months?
Oh, yeah. Now that if you look at the slides, and you'll be able to get this PowerPoint presentation when we get it downloaded. But if you review this video when you get to the end, you'll see the scriptural citations for each one of the names. Most of them came out of First Chronicles, right? And you can see where we get these names. But like Ziv and Aviv and Bull and Etanim, these appear in the Old Torah, right? In the Old Tanakh. So, I've got all the citations listed there so you can see them. Okay. So now Brett asked the question. So the days go from evening to evening for sure? No, they actually go from daybreak to daybreak. That's why it says on the even of the 9th or on the even of the 14th, because they're talking about after the sun goes down on that day. It doesn't start the day, right? And I didn't make this determination really in my own mind when I was satisfied until just this recent presentation in the scripture. I think is kind of clear about that, particularly in, you don't get a lot of discussion about it in the Old Testament. It's like, we know the stuff, you don't. And that's the way it's going to be. But when you read in the New Testament about what happened in terms of Mary going to the tomb, and when Joseph of Arimathea was trying to get the body, there's only one way you can understand that language, and that's with the idea that it was dawn to dawn as the day. Okay, so how do we do the sheaf offering on the first fruits if we're not farmers? Well, this is when it pays to know a farmer, right? This is when it pays to know a farmer, right? Hey, I need some first fruits. What do you got? They hand you a handful of dandelions. There you go, wave that, right? Well, again, and I appreciate this question, Mahela, because if we're not farmers, then, when we talk about the feast, and this is laid out in the Yom Kodesh, by the way, a book you can get on Ed Sefer. The Yom Kodesh has a long discussion about how you practice these feasts at the end, because, when we're talking about first fruits, right? We're talking about us. We're talking about an ascending smoke offering. We're talking about our prayers. We're talking about our worship, our prayers, our baptism. All these things have replaced these animal sacrifices. And so when you're talking about the sheaf offering, and there's what Levite priest are you going to go wave the sheaf offering in front of it? What temple, right? We're going to do that, right? But the idea is to set apart the day, set apart this sheaf offering, and use the sheaf offering, at least in your heart. And you can see the sheaf offering by looking at what's going on in Virgo, right? There's the sheaf offering right there. Okay, all right.
I see another good question here from Sherry Pappen. It says, what do you have to say about the rules of postponement that the rabbis talk about?
Yeah. I answered that question there, Shelley, while you were looking. That
Sorry.
The rules of postponement, no, that's okay. The rules of postponement. I mean, look, there's calendar issues, right? And the rabbi said, well, we're not going to do Pesach if the day of preparation lands on Shabbat, right? We're not going to do it. Okay, now, so here we have another question. Israel, MRI says, when will there be a Portuguese Sefer? You Portuguese people are really kind of pushy, I got to tell you. But I love you to death. I mean, we would love to have a Portuguese scripture next, and I think we're going to do that simply because I think both in Portugal and in Brazil, two absolutely fantastic countries, it would be great to have it in that language. And, with the Spanish Sefer is available. We're working on an Italian Sefer, and we're working on an Urdu, a Sefer in the language of Pakistan. Both of those are being created right now, but I think we're going to have to get started on a Portuguese Sefer. So we're going to need to find our translators who are willing to do it and step into the slot so we can get it done. And, typically it takes 2 years to translate the Sefer. And that's kind of moving along at a pretty good clip. Oh, we also are putting together a Paleo-Hebrew version of the Sefer. That's coming together, and that's going to be sooner than you might think. That's coming together quickly. Okay.
Here's one, Frank and Beans. Would it be legal to do Shabbats by the moon cycle if we were separated from our tribe?
Well, look, Frank and Beans, man, that's a great couple. They are a great couple. And I'm so glad that they participate in this channel. I just love them to death. Well, if you're separated from the tribe and you're doing your Shabbat on the lunar cycle, I mean, the thing is that, if you don't know a 7-day count, but the 7-day count has been consistent for time immemorial, right? Even though somebody wrote me and they said they forgot about their Shabbats, But they didn't, I don't believe they forgot about the 7-day cycle, because I think the 7-day cycle they've tried to replace it in the Etruscan calendar and the Julian calendar with an 8-day cycle. And then, of course, even the Epistle of Barnabas reflects that, right? Which is why the Epistle of Barnabas never made it into Scripture, because it talks about the 8th day. But there was a 7th-day practice going on even during all of that. So if you lose count of the 7th-day count, there's a couple of things you could do. One thing you could do is you could come to the first part of the year, the first month of the year, start your Sabbath cycle on that first new moon, and then keep it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, away you go, right?
Yeah.
One way of doing it, right? Yeah.
Here's another one. James Coletti says, when do we count the first of the month? Is it before the equinox? This is unclear.
Yeah. The first month is going to be the new moon before the equinox, if the equinox appears before the full moon. If the equinox appears after the full moon, then you have to start the first moon after that.
Okay.
Makes sense, right? No, it doesn't. That's the toughest part of the whole thing. But it has to be, it is the full moon just before the vernal equinox. That's when it is. Okay. The full moon just before the the new moon just before the vernal equinox.
All right. We have another one here. Jessica Knock is asking regarding the Hebrew class with Shell. Do the current students re-register and pay?
Do what?
Regarding the Hebrew class with Shell, do current students re-register and pay?
Yes.
Another one here. Beck X Strand. So our offerings are prayers of thanksgiving?
Yes. The prayers actually come as an ascending smoke offering into the heavens, and they're extremely powerful. The incense of the prayers gathers in heaven as the strength of Yahuah on the earth. So, I mean, our prayers are extremely powerful. And that's why Shalomah said this temple should be a temple for all nations, a temple of prayer for all nations, right? That's what he called the temple, not a temple of sacrifice for all nations, but a temple of prayer.
Yeah.
Big, important distinction, right?
Yeah.
Very important.
All right. We have another one here from Ruby. It says, hi, Stephen and Shell. Yahusha had his Passover on the 13th in the evening, which would be the 14th between the evening. I will explain in DM.
Well, I don't think that's right, because if he had it on the evening of the 13th, then that would have been the wrong day. But here's where you get into where there's a lot of conflict on this, because we've been taught, oh, well, the Levite priests were sacrificing all these lambs over at the temple. And then when they sacrificed the last lamb, that's when Mashiach was crucified. Well, not so. Because first of all, the Torah commands the families to sacrifice the lambs, not down at the temple. You're not supposed to be down at the temple. And furthermore, each family is supposed to pick out a lamb on the 10th day, take it home, one of those cute lambs, those cuddly, cute lambs, take that lamb home. And then when your kids fall in love with it, then sacrifice it on the evening of the 14th, right? Not down at the temple. There was nothing going on down at the temple. It wasn't like Yom Kippur where they had the Azazel goat. There was nothing going on at the temple. Everybody was sacrificing the lamb at their own house. And so that's the Torah command. And so when you see that, then, and of course, the idea was you sacrifice it at night because you're going to be leaving at night. You're going to be running out of Egypt at night. And then I was thinking, well, look, Joseph of Arimathea came in because he wanted to get it done before the Sabbath. That's my old teaching. The scripture doesn't show that. In fact, the scripture says that when he was crucified on that day, which would have been the 15th, that he came there at even. He came there to get the body after the sun had gone down, right? He came there to get the body when the sun had gone down. So this kind of changes up the scope of all of that thinking, right? changes up the scope of all of that. Did Mashiach do the Pesach on the wrong day? No, he didn't. He did it on exactly the right day. It was 100% compliant with Torah. But the fact of the matter is that the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin, and even the Pharisees to some degree, were all usurpers. They weren't true Levites. They weren't true in their commission. They had been appointed by Herod as political favors. And so did they care about the Sabbath? Not one little bit. They didn't care at all. And if, we can't crucify him, you have to do it. Do the Romans care about the Sabbath? No, crucify him. Well, is it the Sabbath? Well, it may be, but so what? You're Roman. Why do you care about it? Just get the job done, right? And so there is no indication in the stories in Matthew 27 or in Mark or in Luke. There's none of these that say, oh yeah, it's because he wanted to get the body off before the Sabbath began. That's not there at all, right? And so because of that, I think what we see a real disintegration of no respect for the Shabbat. They were keeping matzah, but they weren't keeping they weren't doing, no servile work. They didn't, no servile work. Does that include rioting over at Pontius Pilate's place, trying to get a guy crucified? Well, that's not servile work. That's just a protest. That's a peaceful protest. Right.
Hearing you explain that, this is what I love about hearing you teach, Dr. Pigeon, is because the context, the history, the culture, what was actually taking place. Because when we're just reading something in black and white and we don't have that kind of information to understand contextually what it is we're seeing, it makes all the difference.
What a difference it was at that time, Shelley, because, the Herodians were not completely in control. And the Romans were not completely in control. And the Hasmoneans hadn't been completely pushed out either. And when you study the bloodlines, you find out that the Herodians were marrying the Hasmoneans.
Wow.
And who was related to one of those marriages? Peter.
Wow.
His mother-in-law was a Herodian. She was the daughter of Herod, Mariamne III. And one of their sons, between Mariamne and Aristobulus IV, one of their sons was this one who was known as Matthias,
wow,
that they called the son of the prophet, Matthias Barnavi, the son of the prophet, right? Which in the Greek became not Barnabi, the son of the prophet, but Barnabas.
Uh-huh.
So who was this 13th disciple that was appointed by the disciples? Matthias Barnabas. And Matthias Barnabas, I was at his grave in Georgia, right? He's buried at Ognios Apsaros, a Babylonian fortress. That's where his grave is. So Matthias Barnabas, right, the son of Aristobulus was in the direct bloodline of Judas Maccabeus. He was a Maccabean king who had married a daughter of Herod. Now, another one of their sons, Aristobulus V, would come to become the first bishop in Britain. Aristobulus V, at the time of Joseph of Arimathea, 36 AD. Aristobulus is acting as a bishop in Britain, the son of a Hasmonean king and a Herodian mom.
Wow.
And to whom Peter was directly related. That was his mother-in-law,
Yeah.
right?
Whom Yahusha healed, right?
Yeah, why did Peter deny Yahusha 3 times? Because Yahusha had healed his mother-in-law. It's a bad joke.
Oh, that's a good one.
But at any rate, when you see the bloodlines, like one of the things is kind of terrifying, right? Who's Judas Iscariot, right? Judas Iscariot. Who is he? Well, his father was Shimon. Well, was that Shimon Keph, Shimon Peter? Was Judas the son of Peter? Don't think so. I think Judas was the son of the one who called himself Simon the Zealot.
The Zealot.
Yeah, Zelotes, right? Shimon Zelotes. And Shimon Zelotes also ended up in Britain. He was killed in Britain. He was, executed in Britain. And why was he zealous? because his son was the traitor.
Yeah.
That's why he was so zealous, because his son was the traitor, right? And, so this kind of stuff, when you start to see these things, I mean, they really start, when you start to see the bloodlines, is like, whoa, wait a minute. And the fact that Kepha was, had come out of a Herodian mother means that he probably was Edomite. He was an Edomite.
Wow.
And so if he was Idumean, he was an Edomite, what does that tell you about Mashiach calling him as a disciple, right? That Mashiach had called those who had no chance at salvation into a chance of salvation before his crucifixion.
Right.
Because the truth be told, everybody had no chance at salvation. When he says, I've come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel are those who confess Mashiach and no others.
Yes.
So when I've come for the lost sheep of the house of Israel, they don't know they're lost yet. But once they confess me that they were once was lost, but now they're found.
Now they're found. Isn't that amazing? Just amazing. Yeah. This has been a really good, a good presentation. I don't know if you want to take more questions or not.
Well, let me look at just a couple more here. There's one here that is, okay. Okay. Passover is on the 14th. Okay. All right. That's not a question. Okay. Somebody writes, my thoughts on the current events with Russia. Well, okay, I know I read in the Bible, that the sun has to cross the equator to start the calendar, right? Yeah, now, Debbie, that's in the book of Hanok. That's in the book of Hanok, actually. And yeah, that is that discussion. Yes, it is. Ruby asks, hi, Stephen and Shell. Yahusha had his Passover on the 13th. Oh, that was Ruby that was talking about that. Yeah, yes. Okay, Ruby, we'll talk about that in direct message, too. We got more to talk about that. Okay, Debbie asked my thoughts on current events with Russia. Well, here, I'm just going to summarize it this way. Russia has told the United States since 2014, you can't put NATO missiles in Ukraine. We won't put up with it. And the United States says, you're just kidding. We can do it if we want. You don't have the strength to stop us, but just shut up and we're going to do whatever we want, blah, blah, blah. And Putin kept saying, I don't want you to put missiles there. You guys promised, you signed a writing that said you would not expand NATO into former Soviet republics. Well, look, we're not respecting any of our old agreements. Times change, and we got new people involved here. We don't have to respect anything we did before. We reserve the right to change all of our treaties with the next president who gets elected. So what do you think about that? Ha, 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 ha. Right? And so Russia, in this sense, really going all the way back into last summer, Russia has been telling the United States, do not escalate, right? Because Joe Biden immediately began to escalate in Ukraine as soon as he got elected. We're going to escalate. We're going to put them in NATO. And Zelensky kept talking about, we want to be in NATO. We want to be in the EU and, put missiles here, put troops here, blah, blah, blah. Kept going and going and going. And Russia says, we're not going to allow it to happen. It's not going to happen. We're not going to do it. And so there's been this perpetual escalation. And then last summer, Zelensky and Ukraine declared war on Russia. And then Russia was like, you really want to go to war? And so Russia was like, well, we're going to pound you. And so Zelensky backs out, right? Until this year. Now, all of a sudden, at the bidding of MI6 in England and at the bidding of the Biden administration, we're not going to tolerate you holding on to Crimea anymore. Give back the land to Ukraine and give back the Donbass, right? And then they gave the go-ahead to Zelensky, go get that stuff back. So Zelensky puts 80,000 troops along the border of the Donbass, and he puts 40,000 troops along the Crimea. When he did that, Russia began to mobilize. And they began to mobilize and mobilize and mobilize and mobilize and mobilize. And eventually it broke into when they started shooting, when the Ukrainian troops opened fire on a kindergarten in the Donbass. And then, I don't know, it was maybe 4 days ago, there were 141 sites along the Donbass where Ukraine was, shelling artillery and tank shells into civilian population. And the Russians already have evidence of 10,000 dead. So the Russians said, we're not doing it anymore. So they recognized Luhansk and Donetsk, and they said, we're coming in. And then they said, okay, well, as independent republics, we want you to come in and help us. We're Russian-speaking people. So the Russians came into those provinces. When they came into those provinces, the Ukrainians opened fire. They said, well, now we're at war. Russia's in our country. And so Russia said, all right, well, since that's the case, we're coming in big time. So they have invaded from the north. They've invaded from the east. They've invaded from the south. and they have done a marine landing in this area called Mariupol. And so in Mariupol, they have already pushed and captured the major city there. The Russians are pushing in from the Donbass into Ukraine. They've already captured major cities north of Crimea, including Odessa. They've captured this. And there are 16 aircraft, Ilyushins, right? Those are the largest planes in the world, full of Russian paratroopers that are being dropped over Kiev. So Russian helicopters are over Kiev. All these paratroopers are over Kiev. And the Russians have said, we're not keeping Ukraine. We're going to go in there. We're going to arrest all of parliament and all the leaders, and we're going to destroy all the NATO armament. And we're going to reinstate Lukashenko, who can then have a free election. And that is going to be respectful of the fact that we don't want NATO on our borders. And so this is what they're saying. Now, Vladimir Putin told Emmanuel Macron, the president of France, he told him, look, you don't know what you guys are doing. If you were to admit Ukraine into NATO and Ukraine being as out of their mind as they are, Ukraine likes nothing better than to poke Russia in the eye and then say, you guys need to come over here and beat him up. We poked him in the eye, yeah, but he's mean, and you guys need to come over here and beat him up. Well, Zelensky is dragging all of Europe into World War III, just as the assassin who shot the Archduke Ferdinand drug all of Europe into World War I, where millions and millions of European young men died. This is going to be a similar situation, because as soon as Putin launched this full-scale invasion into Ukraine, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland and Estonia all invoked Article 4 of NATO, meaning all of you guys are instantly committed to defending us as NATO members. And by the way, there's shelling going on between Belarus and Poland. So now Italy, Portugal, Spain, France, Germany, the UK, they're all immediately involved in defending Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland. Get your troops over here, because now you have to defend us. That's what Article 4 says. And Putin has told them, and he told them outright, he said, look, do not interfere in what we're doing in Ukraine, because if so much of any of your stuff crosses the border into Ukraine, any of your foreign troops come into Ukraine to confront us, we're going to hit you with weapons you have never seen before. Now, that's a pretty onerous threat. And so the thing is that, will the West figure this out and do the right thing? And I think the answer is no, they won't, because we have people who do not use common sense, and they certainly do not believe in the written word. They don't believe in what people are saying when someone comes to them and says, hey, we're not going to put up with it anymore. You can't do this to us anymore because you're giving us no choice. Now our choice is to lay down and die, and you rape our country. And that's not what's going to happen. So Biden has come out and said, well, we're going to hit them with massive sanctions, right? They've been under sanctions now for 9 years, 10 years. We're going to hit them with massive sanctions. We're going to kick them out of the SWIFT system. We're going to deprive them of doing this. We're going to deprive them of doing that. Well, guess what? Russia controls 93% of all the helium in the world. Helium is absolutely mandatory for running server farms like Google's cloud, Amazon's cloud, Microsoft's cloud, etc. These clouds are dependent upon helium. The United States has completely exhausted its helium, and the only source to get some is from Russia.
You know what, Dr. Peter, I don't really understand that. What do you mean about that with the helium?
Servers create a tremendous amount of heat. When you have a server farm, it gets very hot. You think about all your computers that you went through, Shelley, that
Right.
burned out because they were hot all the time, right?
Yeah.
I've had laptops that were so hot they burned my leg if I ever put them on me, right?
Yeah, me too.
Because they create a tremendous amount of heat. And when you have a server farm, they're really hot. So they have to use cooling mechanism inside that cloud facility to keep all those servers cool.
Okay.
And it requires helium. And the helium is gone. All the American helium is gone.
Wow.
They need to get it from Russia, and Russia's not going to deliver it.
So helium, I mean, forgive my ignorance of the periodic table here, but where does helium come from?
It is a fundamental element.
Okay.
It's an element where it's not like it's a gas you can create. It's a gas you have to capture.
Is it in the earth? Is it in
Yeah.
Okay.
And so here we are. So now we're starting to see. Now, in the meantime, get this. Before this conflict started, before Joe Biden drove this thing over the top with this media hype, trying to create this war, 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas was costing Europeans 270 euros for 1,000 cubic feet. Okay. Then Joe Biden came in and said, we're shutting down the Nord Stream pipeline, not available. So Germany, even if you want gas from the Russians, we're not going to let you have it. As soon as he said that, then America tried to replace the natural gas. Gas shot up to $1,000 for 1,000 cubic feet. So that's better than tripling the cost of natural gas. Okay. Now they're saying natural gas is going up to $1,600 for 1,000 cubic feet. And that by the end of the month, it'll be around $2,000 for 1,000 cubic feet. So now you're paying what? 9 times the price. So if your gas bill was $200 last month, next month it's going to be $1,800. Right? So that's premise number 1. Premise number 2, in comes the hacking the grid. Right now, we have our mobile, our in doomsday planes. They're off the ground and flying because they're so fearful that nukes are coming in. The Hasidic community in New Jersey and in New York has been ordered by their rabbis to evacuate and go to the Catskills.
I saw that.
What do they know that we don't know? Right? Because they know what's coming. And the truth is that once these countries have invoked this article, it forces all of Western Europe to go to war with Russia. And Russia has already told the head of NATO, look, we don't have the conventional weapons you guys have. That's why we went to nukes.
Right.
And I did a discussion with Scott Bennett. I did a discussion with others saying, look, you and I did a great show on it, presentment on Ukraine. The truth of the matter is that what's Europe going to look like when there's no Brussels, when there's no Paris, when there's no Basel? You want to kick us out of the SWIFT system? How about when there is no SWIFT system? How about Basel, Switzerland doesn't exist anymore? There's no International Bank of Settlements. How about there's no City of London? If the Russian capability is such that if they put a 300 megaton, 75 megaton nuclear weapon, like the one that detonated in Tonga, if they put that up at 300,000 feet over Europe, all of the electric grid in Europe is gone. It goes dark. That's it. All the cell phone systems are gone. All the electric grid is gone. They put one over Omaha, Nebraska, coast to coast, all the way to northern Manitoba and all the way into Mexico. Everything is fried. And not only that, but anything that's hooked to the grid. So let's say you're up in Prince George, British Columbia. You're outside that shockwave, you think, except you're hooked to the grid in British Columbia. The voltage coming down the line is going to fry all of your transformers. That's just two weapons that don't kill anybody. We haven't killed anybody. We didn't wipe out any of your cities. No infrastructure was touched, except you're now back in the dark age and you have no chance of rebuilding your electric system for the next 70 years. So what's happening right now is this, and this is what I would say to everybody who's watching this. I wasn't intending this to be a commentary on this, but we're called to do this because some of us are going to survive, some of us aren't.
Right.
And, we should have no fear of being ones that don't survive. If we don't survive, we don't survive. Okay, we'll go see Yahusha. If we do survive, then what? We have to be a light in the window. We have to be a menorah on a stand. And we have to be able to point to other people and say, look, there is no calendar. There is no clock. Nobody's going to be printing the Gregorian, algorithm anymore. So what do we know? So what day is it? I don't know. What month is it? I don't know. How do we tell? Can anybody find a Gregorian calendar so we can find out if this is March or April, right? But with this system I just explained to you, you can look up and go, oh, there's the equinox. So we know we're in the first month of the year. That's the full moon. It's the 15th day. And when you get to the dark moon, I remember that we had the full moon there in the first month. And now this is a dark moon. We must be in the second month. Boom. Now you know. Now you know just like that. And you know how to count the hours, you know how to count the days, you know how to count the months, you even know how to count the years. You know how to count all of these things because you can look into the heavens and see the greater light, the lesser light, and the stars and figure out where you are. So what I'm going to say to the people who now, when we're facing this off, take your time to learn your constellations, right? Don't
That's
worry
what
about
I was
this.
thinking. You
Yeah.
know, I used to take a college course when I was in college. I took a course. I wish I could remember more of it now, but it was on celestial navigation because I loved to sail. And I think that those things are going to come back in. I'm really excited about the class that we're going to have on the Mazarot on Sefer Academy. What a great course to have at this time on the
At
earth.
this time, yeah. And this is why these things become so critically important, Shell, because we want to be able to have a reckoning that is scriptural, that just because we know it, we don't have to have a GPS calendar. We don't have to have a this. We don't have to have that. We know how to reckon. We know how to reckon because it's in our heart and it's in our mind, because what? Yah gave it to us. Yah gave it to us. Okay. All right. So with that, I'm going to call that our last question. And I want to thank you guys. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And Shelley, thank you for being here during the course of this show, And I know it was kind of crazy and there was a lot in this show, but I'm really happy that everybody was here. And I think I pretty much wrapped up what I'm going to do on the seasons now.
Good.
And so we're going to be looking at some new stuff next week.
Well, these have been some wonderful presentations, and I really appreciate you inviting me to come on with you tonight. What a privilege. Thank you.
You bet, Shelley. And I'm looking forward to you being on Sefer Academy. So thank you much.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys. So we're going to call it a day. So thank you for being with us. And let's say a little prayer. Baruch atah Yahweh Sebaot Al Kadad Yasharel, our Holy One of Israel. Father, you have given us such wonderful things, wonderful times, and such beauty in this world. And you've done it as you have seen fit for the glory of your name. May your name be glorified in us. May we be your children. May you be our Elohim. Help us to lose the other false gods and to follow what you have done. Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart of flesh, that we might also extend your love to those around us. Be with us this week, Father, in spirit and in truth. B'Hashem Yahusha. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Thanks so
All
much,
right.
Shelley. We will
Good
see you
night.